Chapter 1543. Mercy my ass! He scolded helplessly. I just wanted to find a helper, but the others were all chosen, so I had no choice but to pick you. You didn't even try to live up to my expectations. You spent 50 years to reach foundation establishment, and now… Forget it. Fortunately, Xiaohua is here, so I can finally hold my head high. 50 years? Xiaohua secretly stuck out his tongue in his heart. If Xiangyang used 50 years to reach foundation establishment, even if he was only 35 years old when he entered the Imperial Thunder Sect, he would be 85 years old now. What about his cultivation after foundation establishment? No wonder he looked so old. Yes, with little junior brother, master doesn't need to lose face anymore. Xiangyang wasn't angry at all and smiled apologetically. Forget it, let's go. He waved his sleeve helplessly and said, I'm afraid your master's wife and the others are waiting anxiously. Yes, do you need me to send them a message? Xiangyang was still smiling. Master's wife? Them? Xiaohua was stunned and secretly said, Could it be that master has concubines? I'll… Thinking of concubines, Xiaohua suddenly shouted for no reason as if he remembered something. What's wrong? Xiaohua looked at Xiaohua strangely. That… Master, disciple wants to ask you, a disciple of a gold course stage cultivator, how should I address them? Xiaohua muttered. Nonsense, that depends on the disciple's cultivation level. Xiaohua scolded Xiaohua softly and rolled his eyes. He also thought of something and said with a smile, If they're chi refinement like you, of course they should be called junior sister or senior sister. If they're foundation establishment, then they can be called martial uncle. That's good. Xiaohua's heart was at ease. Looking at Xiaohua's somewhat ambiguous gaze, his face was somewhat unnatural. What? Did a gold course stage grandmaster go to the Imperial Thunder Palace to recruit disciples this time? Xiangyang said with some astonishment. This is extremely rare. That boy who was chosen has some luck. Idiot, it's a girl. Xiaohua scolded Xiaohua, but then he helplessly slapped his head and said, Oh, damn it, there are too many things today. I actually forgot to bring Xiaohua to the Jade Archive Hall. Right. At this moment, Xiaohua also thought that he hadn't gone to the Jade Archive Hall yet, and hadn't been registered. No wonder he always felt that something was missing. Forget it. Let's go to the Immortal's cave first. Helplessly, he thought for a moment and said, I'll ask your eldest senior brother to bring you there later. Yes, disciple will follow master's orders. Xiangyang bowed and said. Helplessly, he seemed to be used to Xiangyang's respect. Without saying anything, he waved his hand. Let's go, Xiaohua. Let me see if you have truly comprehended the lightning avoidance technique. Yes, master. Xiaohua wasn't afraid of anything. After helplessly flying away, he asked Xiangyang to go first and followed behind the two. Seeing that Xiaohua was very respectful towards him, Xiangyang was also very happy. He slowly flew together with Xiaohua and secretly used his magic power to help Xiaohua. Xiaohua's heart felt warm, but he didn't say anything. He only secretly nodded towards Xiangyang to express his thanks. When they arrived at last night's place, helplessly stopped. He looked at Xiaohua and signaled him to fly forward. Xiaohua was very free and flew forward without consulting anyone. Behind him, Xiangyang was somewhat worried. Thump! Thump! Several fierce sounds of his heartbeat resounded. Xiaohua hurriedly circulated his magic power and displayed the spell formula he had comprehended yesterday. Sure enough, the sound immediately disappeared. Soon after, Xiaohua stealthily released his perception. The monstrous thunder waves once again attacked him. However, as Xiaohua sped up the spell formula, his perception was like a small boat freely cruising through the thunder waves, no longer suffocating. Great! Xiaohua's face revealed a happy expression. He withdrew his perception and turned his head with a smile. It's very useful, master! Ha! Helplessly's originally worried heart immediately relaxed. He smiled and said, Like I said, this time this old man definitely didn't make a mistake. My myriad Thunder Valley will definitely shine in the Imperial Thunder Sect, no, in the country of Shi. Xiaohua curled his lips. It seemed that in the Spring Thunder Palace, Helplessly didn't want to accept him as a disciple several times. Hey, they're here too? Helplessly smiled and looked into the distance again. This time, Xiaohua didn't use his divine sense. He just silently followed behind Helplessly. After flying forward for the time it took to brew a cup of tea, two women appeared in the distant sky. The woman in front was at the late foundation establishment stage. She looked to be about 50 years old, but her skin was fair and her black hair was like clouds. Her every movement was quite elegant, and her colorful clothes were very cheering. The person behind her was a female cultivator about 60 years old. Her hair was grizzled, and her cultivation was probably at the middle foundation establishment stage. She wore a cyan Taoist robe that didn't look gorgeous. Hey, this? Xiaohua's eyes flashed. He somewhat understood. Sure enough, when they approached, the well-behaved Xiang Yang stepped forward and bowed. Greetings, Master's wife! The female cultivator in front smiled and nodded. The female cultivator behind her flew to the side and landed beside Xiang Yang. Disciple Xiaohua greets Master's wife. Xiaohua immediately stepped forward and bowed. You're called Xiaohua? You seem to be a very young child. The female cultivator smiled and used her hand to support Xiaohua. She then looked at Helplessly and said, Congratulations, husband, for taking in a disciple as desired. Ha ha ha, Helplessly stroked the beard on his chin, very proud. He pointed at the female cultivator and said, Xiaohua, this is your master's wife. Her name is Xue Minghui. Back then, she was, Ba. Without waiting for Helplessly to finish, Xue Minghui spat and said with a slightly red face, You old thing, you've been saying this for over 100 years. You still don't know when to get tired. Of course I don't get tired. Helplessly shrunk his neck and said in a low voice. Xiaohua laughed inwardly. After he got up, he turned around and bowed to the other female cultivator. Disciple Xiaohua greets senior sister. I don't dare. Junior martial brother, please rise. That female cultivator saw that Xiaohua was young and also had a smile on her face. She stretched out her hand but looked at Xiang Yang. Xiaohua is only 25 years old. He's just a child. Xiang Yang understood the meaning of his dual cultivation partner. As he spoke to that female cultivator, he said to Xiaohua, This is elder brother's dual cultivation partner. Her name is Yan Qinglian. Hearing that Xiaohua was only 25 years old, Yan Qinglian's eyes were filled with astonishment. She then didn't hide anything and reached out to help Xiaohua up. With a pat of her hand, she took out a jade bottle from her storage pouch and handed it over. She said with a smile, Senior sister doesn't have anything good here. Take this foundation building pill. It'll be useful when you build your foundation. Xiaohua's heart warmed. He took it with his hand and said with a smile, With senior sister's foundation building pill, how could I not dare to build my foundation? Otherwise I'd be angered by the heavens and resented by men. Ah? Ha! Not only did Yan Qinglian cover her mouth, but Xue Minghui also covered her mouth and laughed. She said, This child is much stronger than Xiang Yang. Our myriad Thunder Valley won't be boring anymore. Soon after, she said somewhat apologetically, Xiaohua, master's wife, also prepared a foundation building pill, but Qinglian already gave it to me. It's not good for master's wife to take it out. Let's wait until we return to the Immortal's cave. Okay, master's wife. I like everything you give me. Xiaohua beamed with joy. He'd naturally like something even better than a foundation building pill. Let's go. Helpless waved his hand and took the lead with Xue Minghui. Xiang Yang and his wife weren't in a hurry. Xiang Yang waved his hand, and just like before, he took Xiaohua to his right while Yan Qinglian flew to his left. The group of 5 flew towards Helpless Immortal's cave in Myriad Thunder Valley. After flying for about 4 hours, a tall mountain peak appeared in front of them. Halfway up the mountain peak, A vigorous mountain ape was standing in front of an immortal's cave in a very serious manner. Helpless waited for them to descend from the sky. That mountain ape jumped in front of Helpless and waved its arm, pointing here and there, as if it was saying something. Helpless stretched out his hand and patted the mountain ape's head. He took out some kind of medicinal pill and threw it to the mountain ape. The mountain ape nimbly caught a handful and threw it into its mouth. Then, very satisfied, it retreated. Immediately after, it looked at Xiang Yang and the others who slowly landed on the ground. The gaze it used to look at Xiaohua was very vigilant. Xiao Shan, this is I's little junior brother. In the future you two can get closer. Xiang Yang pulled Xiaohua's hand and said to the mountain ape very intimately. It was unknown whether that mountain ape really understood or was pretending to understand. It nodded in a very serious manner, and even stretched out its hand to touch Xiaohua's arm, as if it was familiar with him. Xiaohua scratched his head. He could only say the same thing he said to Little White Dragon. Hello, Xiao Shan! Xiao Shan blinked its red eyes, as if it understood. Xiaohua was happy. Just as he was about to say something, who knew that Xiao Shan would squeak and scurry into the forest beside the cave. Hee, I'm afraid it saw some pheasant, Xiang Yang said with a smile. This guy likes to roast things the most. Xiaohua's perception swept over. Indeed, that mountain ape was chasing a fat pheasant. Following Xiang Yang and his wife into the cave, Xiaohua subconsciously nodded. This was the place that he wanted to cultivate. Helpless Cave was quite big. There were many moonlight stones around the stone walls, illuminating the entire cave. The entire cave was abnormally clean. Inside the cave, there were jade tables and jade chairs, as well as some seemingly ordinary things. In the corner, there were 2 mirrors that flickered with brilliance. They seemed to be the entrance to the back of the cave. Xiaohua, sit anywhere you want. Yan Qinglian helplessly sat on the seat of honor with Shui Minghui. Xiang Yang also sat on the chair beside them. Yan Qinglian smiled and said to Xiaohua. She then walked towards the light in the corner of the cave. When she got close, she took a step and disappeared from the stone wall. Xiaohua looked around, then picked up Xiang Yang's hand and sat down. Not long after, Yan Qinglian came over from the other side of the stone wall, holding a jade tray in her hand. On top of it was a teapot, as well as a few small cups. Beside the teapot, there were also 2 plates. Inside the plates were lush green fruits. Yan Qinglian placed the fruits and the cup filled with tea in front of Helpless. She smiled and walked in front of Xiaohua. Little junior brother, come and taste Master's Cloud Mist Tea and my 10,000 Thunder Valleys green thunder fruit. This is something that you can't eat anywhere else. Many thanks, senior sister. Xiaohua smiled and took the green thunder fruit. He picked one up and put it in his mouth. Zzzt, zzzt, zzzt. A feeling like lightning struck came from his mouth. -6. Chapter 1544. Get out of here! Helplessness scolded. You just came to my cave and you're already trying to steal my wine? Bah! Don't scare the kid! Shui Minghui spat. Xiaohua is not someone else. What's wrong with letting him drink? Hee, madam, as long as it's not for Qian Qinghua. Oh, I forgot to tell madam. Helplessness suddenly thought of something and said, I was wondering why Qian Qinghua hasn't come here to drink for so many years. Something happened. TSK. Xiaohua smacked his lips in disdain. He knew Helplessness must have something to do with Qian Qinghua, so he didn't mention it until now and pretended to forget. What? Something happened to Qian Qinghua? Shui Minghui was stunned and asked anxiously. Fine, you see, I was just talking about Qian Qinghua. Look how anxious you are, Helplessness said. And you said you never cared about him? Shui Minghui's face was a bit unnatural. She glared at Helplessness and said, Qian Qinghua is my junior brother. He has been with me since he was young. How can I not care? Since he was young. How can I not care? Helplessness said with a bit of jealousy and sarcasm. What? It's true. Xue Minghui's face also twitched as she replied. Oh, so that's it. Xiaohua now understood why helplessness didn't have a good tone towards Jian Qinghua. Looks like there's a story between the three. At this time, Xiaohua suddenly felt his sleeve being pulled. He looked down and saw Xiang Yang and Yan Qinglian already got up. It was Yan Qinglian who pulled Xiaohua's sleeve and signaled him to go out. Xiaohua didn't dare to be careless. He exerted a bit of force and slowly moved out of the cave. Unfortunately, he had just taken a few steps when he heard a helpless shout. Xiaohua, tell me about your encounter with Xian Qinghua. Don't mention what the sect master is worried about. Eh? Xiaohua, you met Xian Qinghua? Xue Minghui asked curiously. This? Xiaohua touched his nose and helplessly walked back. He told the story again with a strange face, but he didn't tell the truth about the thunder-devouring bead. Oh? Blue fire actually used the soul oblivion technique? Xue Minghui's face was filled with extreme worry. All right, teacher's mother knows. These are all sect master's guesses. Disciple didn't see them. Xiaohua smiled apologetically. Sai, go ahead. Xue Minghui waved her hand. Yes. Xiaohua felt relieved and immediately ran away. As soon as he reached the entrance of the cave, he heard Xue Minghui say in a low voice. Look at Qian Qinghua, he is younger than you, but his cultivation is higher than yours, and now he has made such a great contribution to our Imperial Thunder School. Then look at you, I know you're on duty in Myriad Thunder Valley. You. Why did I take a fancy to you back then? He must have been possessed. What kind of contribution did he make? If it weren't for my disciple, his belongings would have been stolen long ago. He wouldn't have had the time to use the soul oblivion art. It's all because of Qian Qinghua's things that you accepted him as your disciple. Xiaohua had a strange expression on his face as he fled out of the cave. Xiang Yang and his wife were already waiting at the entrance. Both of them also had strange expressions on their faces. Xiang Yang didn't say much. With a wave of his hand, he flew away with Xiaohua. Master and teacher's wife are like this. After they sat down, Xiang Yang let out a sigh of relief and said with a smile. It is said that teacher's wife was an early-stage foundation establishment cultivator like master. Not only was she as beautiful as a flower, but her cultivation was also higher than master's. She was a top disciple from converted Thunder Palace. Many disciples wanted to dual cultivate with teacher's wife, including Qian Qinghua, but teacher's wife took a fancy to master and followed him to Myriad Thunder Valley. Hundreds of years have passed since then. Master and mistress often bicker, so they'll forget about it soon. Yan Qinglian took out some of the spirit wine she brewed herself and agreed. Master and teacher's wife don't have any children? Xiaohua smelled a very fragrant aroma and felt that this spirit wine was different from the wine he imagined. He took a sip and said, if they had children, they wouldn't quarrel anymore, right? While he was talking, a burning spirit qi rushed out from his dantian, causing his face to turn red. That spirit qi rushed into his meridians, forcing Xiaohua to quickly use his mental cultivation method. Little junior brother, this spirit wine can only taste its true flavor if you don't use your mental cultivation method. Xian Yang's voice sounded in Xiaohua's ears. Oh. Xiaohua put away his mental cultivation method and let the spirit qi move along his meridians. It was also strange. Along with the movement of the spirit qi, Xiaohua's mind was rushed up to the 9th heaven and then quickly fell back down. When it fell back into his body, it was like flowing water that flowed endlessly. When the spirit qi disappeared into his meridians, Xiaohua let out a sigh of relief. His whole body was comfortable and he didn't even want to raise his little finger. He said with a smile, This Immortal's method is indeed different. Your senior sister-in-law's spirit wine is nothing. The spirit wine brewed by teacher's wife can make one's mind go up and down. That's what I call satisfying. Xiang Yang said in a low voice. It's a pity that it's monopolized by master, even I rarely drink it. It's because your cultivation is too low. You couldn't get the thunder-amplifying fruit from the 10,000 Thunder Valley, so I could only use other spirit fruits to replace it. If you can pick the thunder-amplifying fruit, you can also drink the same spirit wine. Yan Qinglian said unhappily. He. Xiang Yang didn't refute and said, "Go to the inner room and take out the mental cultivation method." Okay, Yan Qinglian nodded and entered. Xiang Yang's cave was much smaller than the one in helplessness, but it was also very clean. There were also many things, but there were 2 holes in the stone wall, which were different from the ones in helplessness. Not long after, Yan Qinglian came out with a booklet in her hand and handed it to Xiang Yang. Xiang Yang flipped through it and handed it to Xiaohua. "Take it, this is the method to refine a magic tool that you wanted just now." "Ah?" Xiaohua was stunned and hurriedly pushed it. "Didn't Master say to wait until after I built my foundation? Eldest senior brother doesn't need to make things difficult for me. I told you to take it, so take it," Xiang Yang said with a straight face. "Master already said that I'll give you pointers on the cultivation method before you built your foundation. I just took out a mental cultivation method, and you don't want it? Then, many thanks, eldest senior brother," Xiaohua said with a smile. "What's there to be polite about? If there's anything you don't understand, don't hesitate to ask me," Xiang Yang said with a smile. "What Master said is right. The lesson of building your foundation for 50 years is enough for you to learn." Xiang Yang's smile revealed bitterness. Xiaohua wanted to say something, but he didn't know what to say. He could only put the booklet into his storage bag and said with a smile, "It's getting late. Eldest senior brother should take me to the Jade Archive Hall. Don't let them miss me. They dare." Although Xiang Yang said this, he didn't dare to be negligent. He stood up and said, "Qinglian, I'll take Xiaohua back to Zhenlei Palace. You can cultivate by yourself first. And you two go. Xiaohua, come over when you have time." Yan Qinglian smiled and sent the 2 of them out of the cave. She then reminded Xiang Yang, "It's fine, come back early, don't." She wanted to say something but stopped. Xiang Yang said with a smile, "Don't worry, your husband won't bicker with them." Xiaohua listened strangely. He really didn't understand what they were talking about. When Xiaohua followed Xiang Yang to Zhenlei Palace, it was already close to noon. Under the bright sun, Zhenlei Palace appeared dazzling on the mountain peak. There were still many young disciples shuttling back and forth between the many palaces of Zhenlei Palace. Some were busy, some were leisurely. In short, it was a warm scene. Inside Zhenlei Palace, in a very deep and quiet place, 2 disciples were bored to death standing in front of a very simple and unadorned palace door. These 2 disciples were at the 12th level of Qi refining realm. Their figures were tall and straight, and their faces were as white as jade. Occasionally, there would be arrogance between their brows. With one look, one could tell that they weren't easy to get along with. At this moment, the disciple on the left wearing a moon-white Taoist robe looked at the spacious corridor in front of him and couldn't help but curse. "Damn it, where did that Xiaohua run to? It's already been 24 hours, why hasn't anyone brought him to Jade Archive Hall? Was this guy killed to silence him?" "Hee, junior brother Zhen Liang, Xiaohua is the number 1 disciple of this year's disciple selection. He has some tricks up his sleeves. How could he be silently killed in the Imperial Thunder sect? Bullshit, he's just a bullshit. I heard from the disciples of the aristocratic families that came to Jade Archive Hall yesterday that this guy is just a loose cultivator. The disciples of the aristocratic families all keep their number plates as favors, but he stupidly took it himself. If that's the case, then naturally he's number 1. But how much of this number 1 is fake? Don't you think so, senior brother Zhenming? Humph, if that's the case, this Xiaohua is also a brainless person. If they really fought, he wouldn't be a match for the disciples of the aristocratic families. Of course, senior brother, don't forget that this year we recruited 94 disciples. It's 10 times more than before. Those true experts will pass as long as they can. They won't put in more effort. This is because they know that the true strength is during the disciple selection and the cultivation after entering Zhenlei Palace. Without any support, it's impossible for him to establish himself in the Imperial Thunder sect. Yes, I know. Although Xiaohua's results are good, his aptitude isn't good enough. In the first round, he wasn't chosen by the other martial uncles of the Lightning Palace. In the second round, he was barely chosen by Martial Uncle Wu Hai from the Myriad Lightning Valley. Speaking of Martial Uncle Wu Hai, why do I feel that Xiaohua being chosen by Martial Uncle Wu Hai is a trap set by Martial Uncle Jin? What do you mean? Think about it, the disciple that Martial Uncle Wu Hai chose was taken away by someone. Martial Uncle Wu Hai wanted to use this as a pretext to make a fuss. How could Martial Uncle Jen let him do as he wished? Wouldn't he have to quickly find a disciple that he could use? If he didn't give face to Zhenlei Palace, would Martial Uncle Jen give face to him? Moreover, in the past few hundred years, the influence of the aristocratic families in the Imperial Thunder sect has been gradually expanding. They are almost overshadowing the direct disciples of the Imperial Thunder sect. Martial Uncle Wu Hai is originally between an aristocratic family's disciple and a loose cultivator. If he was given a loose cultivator without any foundation, wouldn't it be the same as eliminating the influence of the aristocratic family's disciples? That Zhen Liang laughed and said, "Senior brother Zhen Ming is thinking too much. I don't think it's that complicated. Martial Uncle Wu Hai only has one disciple. He's far from being a capable person. In this lifetime, he will only be in the early stage of foundation establishment. Perhaps Martial Uncle Jen is." While they were talking, a series of footsteps could be heard from the empty corridor far away. -6. Chapter 1545. Sure, I'm afraid Martial Uncle Helplessness has brought Xiaohua here. Zhen Ming frowned and said, Martial Uncle Helplessness is so annoying. He brought Xiaohua out of the Spring Thunder Hall yesterday. Why is he only here now? Why? It doesn't seem to be Martial Uncle Helplessness. It's Xianyang, the one who built his foundation in 100 years. Zhen Liang's eyes were sharp. Good. Zhen Ming's mouth was full of praise, but his eyes were full of mockery. Xiaohua followed Xianyang. After flying for a long time, he felt that Xianyang's flying technique wasn't very good. He couldn't help but ask why Xianyang didn't use the lightning evasion technique. However, Xianyang smiled bitterly and explained the reason behind it. It turned out that although the lightning evasion technique was a unique technique of the Imperial Thunder sect, not every disciple had the opportunity to practice it. Only disciples with a suitable physique and profound cultivation could practice it. Moreover, the 8 great lightning palaces of the Imperial Lightning sect all had the lightning escape art. Among them, the Cosmos Thunder Palace had the most complete lightning escape art. It was divided into 9 levels. The other lightning palaces were either incomplete or modified according to different physiques. When using it, they definitely wouldn't be as fast as the Cosmos Thunder Palace. Thus, Xiaohua understood why Sect Master Qian Lazy was so happy to pass the lightning evasion technique of the Heavenly Thunder Palace to helplessness. As the two talked, they arrived in front of the Jade Archive Hall. Looking at the empty corridor, Xiaohua smiled and said, Eldest martial brother, there were many disciples in the other palaces of the Heavenly Thunder Palace. Why didn't I see anyone here? I'll let you know. The Jade Archive Hall is where the new disciples register. Every year, new disciples will open the Jade Archive Hall. Only disciples at the peak of the 12th layer of the Qi Refining Realm who break through to the Foundation Building Realm can open the Jade Archive Hall and leave their spirit tablets inside. So it's like that. As Xiaohua walked, he saw Zhen Ming and Zhen Liang standing in front of the door. He asked curiously, Is the registration done by the Qi Refining disciples? Of course not, they are just gatekeepers. Xianyang said in a low voice as the two of them walked to the Jade Archive Hall. Coincidentally, when the two of them were only a few dozen feet away from each other, Zhen Liang and Zhen Ming looked at each other and clapped their hands together. A 2-colored light shot out from each of their hands and struck the 2 sides of the Jade Archive Palace's door. Shwa! A 4-colored light shot out from the door and sealed the Jade Archive Palace's door. The two of them didn't even look at Xiaohua and Xianyang as they prepared to leave. Xiaohua didn't understand, but Xian Yang was very anxious. He hurriedly took a few steps forward and shouted, "Martial nephews, I brought Xiaohua to the Jade Archive Hall to register." Why did Martial nephews close the Jade Archive Hall? "Haha, Martial uncle, are you Xiaohua's master?" Zhen Liang laughed. "Well, I naturally didn't." Xian Yang smiled apologetically. "But I was ordered by my master. Since Martial uncle isn't Xiaohua's master, how can you bring Xiaohua to register?" Zhen Ming said with a fake smile. "It's better to wait until Martial uncle cultivates to the late stage of the foundation establishment realm and has the qualifications to choose disciples. Then you can bring your own disciple here to register." These words were originally spoken with a normal tone, but when it came out of Zhen Ming's mouth and entered Xian Yang's ears, it already changed its meaning. It was a pun within a pun. Xian Yang's expression changed and his eyes were about to spit fire. However, he slightly turned his body and looked at Xiaohua, who had a calm expression. He sighed in his heart and forced a smile on his face. He said in a low voice, "I am Xian Yang, a disciple of the Thunder Palace's 10,000 Thunder Valley. Because my master is busy with the 10,000 Thunder Valley, he didn't have time to spare. Thus, he ordered me to bring my little martial brother here to register. My Imperial Thunder sect doesn't have a rule that requires a master to bring his disciple here to register, right? Normally, when the masters come to the Thunder Palace, they would bring their disciples here. I am also an early-stage Foundation Establishment Realm cultivator, so I can barely register. Martial Uncle Xiang, it's easy for you to say. Are you the guard of the Jade Archive Hall or am I the guard? Are you the one who understands the rules of the Jade Archive Hall or am I the one who understands the rules of the Jade Archive Hall? I have been on guard here for many years. Every year, there would be masters bringing their disciples here to register. I have never heard of an early-stage Foundation Establishment Realm cultivator bringing a disciple here to register. But 10 years ago, I indeed saw it with my own eyes." Xian Yang was a little anxious. Martial Uncle Xiang, I saw it 10 years ago. However, I only came to the Jade Archive Hall 9 years ago. I don't know about that kind of thing." Zhen Ming still had a fake smile on his face. "Please return, Martial Uncle Xiang. Next year at this time, Martial Uncle Xiang will bring Xiaohua here." "Next year?" Xiaohua was stunned, but his expression didn't change. You see, you also know that there isn't enough time. Today's matter is something I don't understand and didn't explain it clearly to my master. I hope the two of you can make an exception. If we register another year later, wouldn't that delay Xiaohua's cultivation for a year? This is not appropriate. Eh? You also know it's not appropriate? Zhen Ming said angrily. Since you know it's not appropriate, why didn't you come here yesterday? Why did you make us wait here for 24 hours? Since you know it's not appropriate, why didn't the master come and send a disciple instead? Isn't this not taking the Jade Archive Hall seriously? Xian Yang looked around and slapped his hand. He took out a few high-grade spirit stones from his storage pouch and quietly handed them over. His face was already red. He smiled and said, "This has nothing to do with my master. It's all I's fault for making things difficult for the two of you. These spirit stones can be considered as I's compensation." Martial Uncle Xiang is quite polite. When Zhen Liang saw this, he reached out his hand to remember it. Weighing the spirit stones in his hand, he casually waved his hand, causing the high-grade spirit stones to scatter to the ground. With a cold expression, he said, "What a pity, it's only a few high-grade spirit stones. Martial Uncle Xiang, it's fine if your myriad Thunder Valley is poor, but don't treat my Jade Archive Hall as beggars. Even if you kneel down and give these high-grade spirit stones to my Jade Archive Hall, my Jade Archive Hall won't accept them. You." Xian Yang's face became redder and redder. However, just as his anger rose, he forcefully suppressed it. It's all I's fault, it's all I's fault." Xian Yang was so angry that he forgot to use a spell. He squatted down and picked up those spirit stones. Damn it, you've gone too far. Just as Xiang Yang squatted down, Xiaohua finally couldn't take it anymore. At this time, he already understood the meaning of Yan Qinglian's words when Xiang Yang came out. Thinking about how his eldest senior brother's honest appearance was actually forced into such a state by two 12th-layer qi refining juniors, Xiaohua's temper, which had been ignited long ago, finally exploded. Hee, a piece of trash that no one wants, actually dares to be arrogant. Hearing Xiaohua's angry shout, Zhen Liang slightly tilted his head and scolded with a smile. You're just a rogue cultivator with no reason. Do you think you can be arrogant just because you got first place this time? However, just as he turned his head, he saw a figure rapidly approaching him. Before he could see clearly, the figure was already beside him. You! Zhen Liang was shocked. He absolutely didn't expect Xiaohua to dare to make a move in front of the Jade Archive Hall. Even more so, he didn't expect Xiaohua's movements to be so fast. As he retreated, he was about to make a spell with his hand. Suddenly, he felt his neck tighten. Oh, not good. Zhen Liang was shocked and hurriedly activated his defense. Zhen Liang's whole body flashed, and Xiaohua's hand that was choking Zhen Liang was blocked by a defensive yellow talisman. You're courting death. Zhen Liang's heart was at ease. He made another spell with his hand, wanting to escape from Xiaohua's hand. Do you think you can escape? Xiaohua sneered and increased the strength in his hand. Kachacha. The defensive light around Zhen Liang's neck was immediately crushed by Xiaohua. Xiaohua's strength was originally boundless. After 2 years of tempering his bones with the fire essence flame crystal, 40% of his bones had already turned red. The strength in his hand had increased by several times. Zhen Liang's defensive yellow talisman was shattered by Xiaohua's furious strike. Ah! Zhen Liang couldn't scream anymore. His neck was choked, and his magic power seemed to have been sealed. He couldn't use it anymore, and his face was completely red. What are you doing? Xiaohua attacked Zhen Liang in the blink of an eye. Moreover, Zhen Ling didn't take Xiaohua seriously and didn't have the heart to help. When Xiaohua restrained Zhen Liang, Zhen Ming turned pale with fright. What am I doing? This young master won't do anything? Xiaohua sneered and stretched out his right hand. Pa! He slapped Zhen Liang's face. Walala, another burst of light disappeared. The light followed Zhen Liang's body, and in the blink of an eye, all of Zhen Liang's defenses were broken by Xiaohua's palm. This young master will let you see what it means to look down on people with dog eyes. Xiaohua was really angry at this time. He couldn't think of the word endure anymore. As he spoke, he slapped Zhen Liang's face again. Although Xiaohua held back his strength, how much strength did he use? Although Zhen Liang's cultivation was at the 12th layer of the qi refining realm, and his body could be considered to have some foundation, half of Zhen Liang's face was still instantly swollen, and his nose was bleeding. Rebellion! Rebellion! Zhen Ming jumped up and clapped his hands. He was about to take out his magic weapon. This young master wants to see who dares to stop this young master from doing what he wants to do. Xiaohua's cold words sounded in Zhen Ming's ears, causing him to be startled. He looked at Xiaohua in disbelief, and then looked at Xiang Yang, who was squatting on the ground and seemed to be restrained. You are offending your superior! Zhen Ming still took out his magic tool and said weakly. You dare to attack this young master? This young master will crush you to death. Xiaohua coldly glanced at him and said, What you did to my senior brother, this young master will do to you all the same? Offending my superior? You all have taught this young master before. Moreover, this young master hasn't even registered yet, so it can't be considered offending my superior. You injured my Imperial Thunder Sect's disciple, my Imperial Thunder Sect, and you are not finished. -6. Chapter 1546. Stop bullshitting, I've already passed the selection and am now a disciple of the Imperial Thunder Sect. What do you mean by your Imperial Thunder Sect is mine? Xiaohua said impatiently. Stop bullshitting, pick up the spirit stones on the ground and give them to my eldest senior brother. No, no need, I'll do it myself. Xian Yang finally came to his senses. He really couldn't imagine how his youngest junior brother, who had just reached the 10th layer of qi refining, could be so brave. You're still not picking them up? Xiaohua tightened his grip. Wait until I kill this bastard. Let's see how you'll explain it to your palace master. This? Zhen Ming instantly lost his mind. Seeing the pleading look in Zhen Liang's eyes, he hurriedly squatted down and fought with Xiang Yang to pick up the scattered spirit stones. Then, he looked at Xiaohua pitifully as if he was waiting for instructions. Open the door of the Jade Archive Hall! Xiaohua loosened his grip slightly and said to Zhen Liang. Don't try anything and make me angry! Yes. Zhen Liang's voice was a little hoarse. He didn't dare to delay and activated his magic power. A ray of light shot out from his hands and hit the door of the Jade Archive Hall. Zhen Ming also did the same and the light on the door disappeared. Let's go, eldest senior brother. Xiaohua tightened his grip and dragged Zhen Liang's body into the Jade Archive Hall like a little chick. He then said to Zhen Ming, If you have the ability, don't come in. Xian Yang's face was filled with excitement and worry. He quickly walked into the Jade Archive Hall and thought about how to deal with the aftermath. After thinking about it, Zhen Ming didn't dare to go too far. He stomped his feet and followed in. The Jade Archive Hall was huge. At a glance, there were countless jade tablets placed in different places. Xiaohua roughly looked at the 8 different areas and understood what was going on. Here! Xian Yang obviously knew where the Thunder Palace's jade tablet was. He led Xiaohua to an area that was faintly glowing with yellow light. Open the restriction! Xiaohua said coldly. Zhen Liang and Zhen Ming didn't dare to delay and immediately opened the seal. Zhen Ming then took out a blank jade token from his storage pouch and handed it over to Xiang Yang. Xiang Yang took the jade token and used his divine sense to write something on it. Then 2 ancient words, Xiaohua, appeared on the jade token. All right, junior brother, drop a drop of your blood on it. Xiang Yang raised the jade tablet in front of Xiaohua's eyes and said, Qi condensation disciples don't have divine sense, so they can't pretend to be a life spirit tablet. After using your blood to make a blood tablet, wait until you reach foundation establishment before using the jade tablet to make a life spirit tablet. All right. Xiaohua dripped the blood in his body onto the jade tablet. Xian Yang was careful not to let the drop of blood fall from the jade token, and he released his spiritual will. Who would have thought that the blood droplet would actually not be driven by divine sense, and could not seep into the jade token at all? Xian Yang was slightly stunned. Xiaohua also frowned, his mind racing, and he hurriedly released his perception. At this moment, Xian Yang was trying to use his divine will for the second time. Oh, so that's how it is! Xiaohua felt Xian Yang's divine sense and immediately used his own perception to drive the blood droplet. Under the control of Xiaohua's perception, the blood droplet gradually penetrated into the jade token. Shwa! An extremely bright golden light flashed, and the jade token seemed to be plated with a layer of golden film. Damn it! Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. But at this moment, the golden light on the jade token suddenly disappeared and the jade token returned to its original appearance, just like all the other jade tokens on the table. Hee hee! Xian Yang wanted to say something, but when he saw Zhen Liang and Zhen Ming, one of them was looking at the door while the other was being held by Xiaohua by the neck, he also wanted to say something but stopped himself. He placed the jade token on the table and said, Next to it is my life spirit tablet. My 10,000 Thunder Valley will depend on junior brother from now on. Xiaohua ignored Xiang Yang and turned to Zhen Ming. Don't keep looking at the door. Your palace master won't be coming soon. See if there is anything else I need to do? Nothing. Zhen Ming unhappily turned his head and looked at Zhen Liang in Xiaohua's hand and said, Junior brother Xiao has already been registered and is now an official disciple of the Imperial Thunder Sect. But the enmity between you and my Jade Archive Hall. Hee hee, where there are people, there will be fighting. My master's wife has already taught this little one. Xiaohua shook his hand and threw Zhen Liang in front of Zhen Ming. Zhen Liang nimbly stood up and looked at Xiaohua with eyes that seemed to be spitting fire. If there is anything you are unsatisfied with, I will take it all. As Xiaohua spoke, he slapped his hand and took out an item from his storage bag. He threw it over and said, Also, this young master is here to register under the sect master's orders. You actually dare to obstruct this young master? Isn't this going against the sect master's orders? I am in a good mood today and can't be bothered to argue with you. But if you do anything to make me unhappy again, I will not let you off. Zhen Liang's heart was filled with hatred. Countless thoughts ran through his mind as he tried to think of a way to take revenge on Xiaohua. However, after hearing Xiaohua's words, and then receiving Qian Leizi's command medallion, which Imperial Thunder Sect disciple didn't know about, seeing that the token was almost useless, Zhen Liang was immediately discouraged. He looked at the token left and right, and couldn't find anything wrong with it, so he gave it back to Zhen Ming. Zhen Ming was also shocked and looked at it even longer than Zhen Liang. You too, have you seen enough? If you have, quickly give it back to I. Xiaohua yelled from the side. Xiaohua, since you have the sect master's token, why didn't you show it earlier? Zhen Ming gave the sect master's token back to Xiaohua and said with dissatisfaction. This token, like this? You too think this token is fake? If so, can you two come with me to the 10,000 Thunder Palace? When you see the sect master, you can tell him everything that made things difficult for me. Xiaohua sneered. He didn't take back the sect master's token and just played with it in his hand. Don't. Zhen Ming quickly waved his hand. I didn't mean that. I was just asking why Junior Marshal Brother Xiao didn't take it out earlier. If you took it out earlier, how could there be so many misunderstandings? Pei. Xiaohua saw that they had already shed all pretense of cordiality, and he was in the right, so he no longer hesitated. He pointed his finger and scolded. My senior martial brother is a Foundation establishment cultivator and is your senior. He has already lowered himself, and you still want to make things difficult for him. Why should I give you any face? Senior martial brother didn't argue with you because he is broad-minded. I won't say anything else. You too actually want me to register it next year. Isn't this clearly making things difficult for me? Humph, I want to see who makes me uncomfortable. I will make their life difficult. All right, senior martial brother, is everything fine? Xiaohua turned his head and asked. Oh, everything is fine. Xian Yang came to his senses. Senior martial brother, please lead the way, Xiaohua said with a smile. We still have a lot of things to do. Let's not waste time here. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote for it. -6. Chapter 1547. Xian Yang nodded and left the Jade Archive Hall with Xiaohua. Not long after they left, Xian Yang whispered, Little junior brother. Today. Isn't this too rash? If Master finds out, he'll definitely punish you. Rash? Xiaohua also turned his head to look at the Jade Archive Hall in the distance, and snorted. These two old dogs, they actually want to obstruct this little brother from registering. If this little brother doesn't show his might on this matter, won't he be suppressed by them all day long? But Xian Yang was a bit embarrassed. You still have to stay in Zhenlei Palace in the future. With them interfering, I'm afraid it won't be comfortable. Hee, eldest senior brother, what those two said just now, one is that the master has to bring the disciple to register. That should be nonsense. The second is that I have to wait until the next year to register. That's probably true, right? Yes, little junior brother is right. I only brought you here because the time was right. If I inform Master now, it will definitely be delayed. You see, they deliberately want to make things difficult for me. Moreover, I took out the sect leader's token. Do you think they will report to the Zhenlei Palace's master? Of course I know this, but the problem is, they will secretly hinder your cultivation. Xian Yang didn't seem to ask about the sect leader's token. He was only worried about Xiaohua's cultivation. Xiaohua waved his hand and said, "Didn't Master's wife say that? Where there are people, there will be fights. Since there will be fights, it depends on strength. All schemes are nonsense in front of absolute strength." "Oh, right, little junior brother. You actually subdued a 12th layer Qi refining disciple with just a wave of your hand. You. Xian Yang, who had been worried about Xiaohua, finally realized that his little junior brother was only at the 10th layer Qi refining realm. He actually didn't even put a 12th layer Qi refining disciple in his eyes. Xiaohua smiled and shook his head. "It was just luck. That guy probably didn't expect me to make a move in the Jade Archive Hall. That's why I succeeded." "Right, little junior brother, are you going to stay in Zhenlei Palace? Where is it?" Seeing that Xiaohua had changed the topic, Xian Yang didn't ask any more questions. He pointed his finger and said, "Junior brother still needs to go to the side hall of the Spring Thunder Palace and listen to the arrangements of the Zhen Thunder Palace's disciples there." Leaving aside the fact that Xiaohua and Xian Yang were heading to the side hall of the Spring Thunder Palace, Zhen Ming looked at the swollen side of Zhen Liang's face and smiled bitterly. He whispered, "Junior Marshal Brother Zhen Liang, why don't you take the pill?" "You don't tell me you're going to see the deacon?" "What?" "Little brother has suffered a great loss just like that, allowing Xiaohua, a rogue cultivator, to run wild in my Jade Archive Hall for nothing?" Zhen Liang was clearly still angry. Zhen Ming sighed. He looked at Xiaohua's jade tablet and advised, "Then, Junior Marshal brother, please think about how you should explain this to the deacon." "What's so hard to say?" Zhen Liang shouted, but the more he spoke, the lower his voice became. In the end, he fell silent. After a while, he said, "We can report to the deacon that Xiaohua is abusing his magic power in the Jade Archive Hall. It's the sect master's order, Junior Marshal brother." Zhen Ming reminded, "Why did Xiaohua misuse his powers? In the end, we can't escape from the blame. Are we going to break our teeth and swallow it?" Zhen Liang was unwilling to accept this. Zhen Ming sighed and shook his head slightly. "Today's matter. I'm afraid it will be like this." As he spoke, Zhen Ming patted his storage pouch and took out a jade bottle. He threw it to Zhen Liang and said, "Xiaohua won't make a big fuss about this matter, so we can't expose it either. As for the future, since Xiaohua is in my Zhenlei Palace, we will have countless opportunities to deal with him. He's just a rogue cultivator in the 10th layer of the Qi refining realm. If it wasn't for Xian Yang, a Foundation establishment disciple, he wouldn't have the guts to do this. Damn it, this bastard's speed is really fast." Zhen Liang finally understood. He reluctantly took out the pill from the jade bottle and used his magic power to dissolve it. He rubbed the pill on his face, and the swelling on his face disappeared at a visible speed. "And, if there's an opportunity next time, we have to be careful of this bastard's speed." Zhen Ming nodded. At this moment, a divine sense swept across the hall. Zhen Ming was shocked, and he nudged Zhen Liang with his arm. The two of them quickly walked out of the hall and met Deacon Zhen Zhen. "Zhen Liang, Zhen Ming, did that Wu Hai bring Xiaohua here to register?" Zhen Zhen asked. "Yes, Deacon. Wu Hai didn't come. It was Wu Hai's disciple, Xian Yang, who brought Xiaohua here. Wu Hai actually brought Xiaohua back to the Wanlei Valley first. He's really something. He's not afraid of delaying Xiaohua's registration." As expected, Zhen Zhen didn't say anything. He waved his hand and said, "Since Xiaohua is the last to register, the Imperial Thunder Sect's disciple recruitment is over. You all have worked hard. Go to Qiqia Pavilion and receive your rewards." "Yes, Deacon." Zhen Ming and Zhen Liang bowed. Zhen Liang looked at Zhen Ming and suddenly said, "Oh right, Deacon, there's something I don't know if I should say." "Just say it." Zhen Zhen felt strange and waved his hand. "That, just now, Xiaohua came with the sect leader's token to register." "I didn't know that the sect leader's token, huh? Isn't it just registration? What sect leader's token?" Zhen Zhen was slightly dazed. He thought of the unusual expressions he saw on Wu Hai's and Xiaohua's faces in the Spring Thunder Palace yesterday. He rolled his eyes and said, "Don't worry about other people's matters. We just need to do our own things." Yes, disciple understands. Disciple just feels that Xiaohua is a rogue cultivator. If he obtained the sect leader's token, I'm afraid that my direct disciple, and I understand. Zhen glared at Zhen Liang and signaled him to stop talking. Then, he ordered the two to seal the door of the Jade Archive Palace, and quickly left the Jade Archive Palace. This Xiaohua, how did he obtain the sect leader's token? Zhen thought as he walked. Zhen Liang's words weren't in vain. The mountain where the Zhenlei Palace was located was called the Fledgling Thunder Peak. This fledgling Thunder Peak wasn't a single mountain peak. It was surrounded by a mountain range that stretched for several miles. In this mountain range, there were many wooden houses scattered around. Each wooden house looked very sturdy, and there was a large plaque on the door of each wooden house. On the plaque, there weren't words but numbers written on it. At this moment, Xiaohua was standing in front of a wooden house with Xiang Yang. Xiaohua looked at the plaque in his hand and then looked at the number on the wooden house. He smiled and said, 1134, it's really this one. Then, Xiaohua wasn't in a hurry to enter the house. He turned around and looked at the wooden house on the mountain ridge. Then, he looked at the lush forest and the mountain ridge, and the abundant world energy in the surroundings. He said to Xiang Yang, "Eldest martial brother, you've lived here before, right? It seems to be an excellent place for cultivation." Of course I've lived here before. Moreover, I've lived here for 50 years. Xiang Yang's expression didn't change as he smiled and pointed to the distance. Back then, I lived in number 346. Xiaohua suddenly thought of what happened in the Spring Thunder Palace and couldn't help but ask. That's right, eldest martial brother. Just now, the martial uncle of the Qiqiao Pavilion asked your son, what's going on? If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote. -6. Chapter 1548. Speaking of which, it was very simple. Just as Xiang Yang brought Xiaohua into the Spring Thunder Palace, they ran into a middle-stage foundation establishment disciple. That disciple obviously knew Xiang Yang. With a smile on his face, he asked, "Senior Martial Brother Xiang, where's your son? Why didn't he come to the Spring Thunder Palace?" Xiang Yang's expression didn't change, and he waved his hand. "It's still early. This child is naughty and hasn't descended yet. When he comes later and cultivates to become a deity transformation cultivator, I'll naturally bring him to the Spring Thunder Palace to kowtow to you all." That foundation establishment cultivator smiled and cupped his hands, then hurriedly left. A middle-stage foundation establishment cultivator called Xiang Yang's senior martial brother, and even talked about a child. Xiaohua had long been muttering in his heart, but thinking that this might be his eldest senior martial brother's private matter, and that he didn't see him in the Immortal's cave, he felt embarrassed to ask too much. However, in the side hall of the Spring Thunder Palace, they ran into several foundation establishment disciples. Every one of these people asked Xiang Yang the same question, and Xiang Yang's answers were also the same. However, some disciples smiled kindly, while others sneered or even ridiculed him. Therefore, Xiaohua couldn't help but ask at this time. It's nothing. Xiang Yang's expression was as calm as water. The few disciples I ran into just now all know me. They also lived in this wooden house in the past. Their aptitudes were good, so they quickly cultivated to the foundation establishment realm. However, I was unable to reach the foundation establishment realm. I cultivated for 50 years before I was lucky enough to step into the foundation establishment realm. However, I feel that my aptitudes aren't good enough, but my son might not be. My son might not be suitable for cultivation in the future, but as long as he's suitable for cultivation, he'll definitely become a deity transformation cultivator. Eldest senior martial brother, that can't be, right? Xiaohua was somewhat stunned. He finally understood that Xiang Hua thought of his son as an immortal descending from the heavens. As long as he cultivated, he'd definitely become a deity transformation cultivator. Speaking of his dream, Xianghua's face was somewhat excited, and he said with a smile, "Did you know? Little junior martial brother, I've already thought of a name for the child." "What's his name?" Xiaohua's curiosity was greatly aroused. "Xiang Jili," Xiang Yang said very proudly. "A deity transformation cultivator who knows etiquette." "Good. Good name." Xiaohua gave him a thumbs up and said, "Then little brother will quietly wait for little martial nephew's arrival." Sai, hearing this, the originally excited Xiang Yang sighed and said, "Let's go and see junior brother's wooden house." Xiaohua knew that Xiang Yang had some hidden troubles, so he didn't ask any more and followed Xiang Yang to the wooden house. When he was 3 feet away from the cabin, Xiang Yang pointed at the token in his hand, which then released a misty cyan light towards the closed wooden door. With a swish, a cyan light circled around the cabin from the wooden door. After that, the wooden door disappeared, revealing an open door. Additionally, moonlight radiated from the door. Xiaohua followed Xiang Yang inside and casually looked around. This was a simple and crude hut. Other than a chair, a desk, a praying mat, and a shelf, everything was empty. Xiang Yang looked at Xiaohua and pointed his hand again. The same cyan light once again shot towards the door. The entire cabin was shrouded in a layer of restriction. "Little junior martial brother, I'll tell you the incantation." Xiang Yang handed over the token and told Xiaohua the incantation to control the token. Only then did he say, "Let's go. I'm afraid that you'll have to live here before you reach Foundation establishment. I'd better hurry and take you to Thundershock Palace and get your job done." However, just as Xiang Yang and Xiaohua walked out of the cabin, dozens of Qi condensation disciples just happened to return. The one who came was Wang Yunxiao. Seeing that Xiaohua was actually his neighbor, Wang Yunxiao stared blankly. First, he saluted Xiang Yang, then he thought for a while with Xiaohua, and then he said somewhat strangely, "Junior martial brother Xiao, this wooden house of mine is surrounded by the residences of the Thunder Palace's disciples. Could it be that junior martial brother was also accepted into the Thunder Palace? But I don't know, who is your master?" "Huh! Senior martial brother Wang is actually also a disciple of Thundershock Palace." Xiaohua's face was also full of smiles. He cupped his hands and said, "Junior martial brother's master is Myriad Thunder Valley's helplessness. This is junior martial brother Xiang Yang." "Xiang Yang?" Wang Yunxiao was slightly stunned again. A trace of a smile flashed through his eyes, but that smile was immediately concealed by Wang Yunxiao. He cupped his hands again. "So it's Senior Xiang." How could Xiang Yang not know the meaning in Wang Yunxiao's eyes? He laughed and said, "Who is junior martial brother's master? I'm afraid that when he was teaching you a lesson today, he didn't mention I's name, right?" "No, no!" Wang Yunxiao hurriedly waved his hand and said, "Junior martial brother's master's name is Jinyu. He only mentioned Senior Xiang when he was talking about the difficulty of Foundation establishment. Master also praised Senior Xiang's spirit for being praiseworthy and that his willpower is number 1 in Thundershock sect." Humph, Xiaohua sneered in his heart. He didn't quite understand. Although Xiang Yang used 50 years to reach Foundation establishment, he was still at Foundation establishment after all. Wasn't he countless times stronger than those disciples who didn't reach Foundation establishment? Why was he so famous in Thundershock sect? Oh right, I wonder what kind of odd jobs junior martial brother Xiao is assigned to in Thundershock Palace. I was assigned to 100 Refinements Hall precisely to refine yellow talismans. It's said that if you cultivate well in the future, you can even practice spirit talismans. Junior martial brother hasn't gone to Thundershock Palace yet. Senior martial brother Xiang is about to bring me there," Xiaohua said with a smile. "That's good. Does junior martial brother Xiao have the mind to come to 100 Refinements Hall? I know the deacon in charge of 100 Refinements Hall, so I can put in a few good words for junior martial brother." Wang Yunxiao had the intention of showing off, seemingly trying to rope Xiaohua in. "Ah? Talisman crafting?" When Xiaohua heard this, He hurriedly shook his head and said with a headache, "No, no. Thank you for your good intentions, Senior Marshal Brother Wang. Whenever I see talisman crafting, my head will explode. I've never succeeded. If I were to craft talismans, how would I have the time to cultivate?" Wan Yunxiao smiled very elegantly and said, "All right then. In any case, I'll be crafting yellow talismans in the future. If Junior Marshal Brother Xiao has any needs, feel free to tell me. Who asked us to live together?" "Thank you, Senior Marshal Brother Wang." Xiaohua's face was overjoyed. He happily cupped his hands and said goodbye to Wan Yunxiao. Then, he followed Xian Yang and flew away from fledgling Thunder Peak. Looking at the conversation between Xiaohua and Wan Yunxiao, Xian Yang seemed to have something to say. However, after hesitating for a long time, he flew in the air and reminded, "Junior Marshal Brother, if you lack yellow talismans, feel free to tell me. This Jin Yu and our master have some conflicts. If you take his disciples' things first, master will be angry. Second, taking a gift will shortchange him. He. Xiaohua clapped his hands and took out a pile of yellow talismans from his storage bag. He said with a smile, "Junior Marshal Brother has a lot of yellow talismans here. Who cares about his? Besides, Senior Marshal Brother is a foundation establishment stage cultivator. How could you not know how to craft yellow talismans? Junior Marshal Brother will ask you for them." This? Xian Yang's face was a bit embarrassed. "I really don't know how to craft yellow talismans. It's your Senior Marshal sister who is more adept at crafting yellow talismans. It's SOSO. Xiaohua laughed in his heart and said, "Junior Marshal Brother was just joking with that guy." "That's good." Xian Yang breathed a sigh of relief. Looking left and right, he said in a low voice, "You were in the limelight just now. You actually beat up a disciple on duty at the Jade Archive Hall. Senior Marshal Brother was worried that you would be plotted against. Moreover, this Imperial Thunder sect isn't a monolithic block." "Ah? What do you mean?" Xiaohua was stunned. Speaking of which, Master's wife was right. Where there are people, there will be fighting." Xiang Yang sighed and said, "Let's not talk about the open and covert struggles between the 8 great thunder palaces of the Imperial Thunder sect. Even the disciples within a single thunder palace have some competition." Xiaohua asked curiously. "The 8 great thunder palaces' struggles are understandable. But what about the competition within a single thunder palace? Let's not talk about the ordinary competition between disciples first. That kind of competition can show off one's strengths and weaknesses, obtain the approval of the masters, and then obtain high-level cultivation techniques, medicinal pills, spells, and so on. These are all very important for a cultivator's cultivation. Let's talk about the disciples who have just been accepted into the Imperial Thunder sect. First, there are 2 levels in terms of birth. One is the children of cultivation families, and the other is the loose cultivators like Junior Marshal Brother. Of course, the Imperial Thunder sect accepts very few loose cultivators, but there are after all. Among the cultivation families, they are divided according to the size of the family. Then, according to the distribution of the disciples of those families in the Imperial Thunder sect, they are divided into different small areas of influence. It's so complicated? Xiaohua was somewhat stunned. However, Senior Marshal Brother's words, Junior Marshal Brother is somewhat puzzled. Since the disciples of the aristocratic families enter the Imperial Thunder sect, then they are naturally the disciples of the Imperial Thunder sect. I'm afraid that they can no longer have any relationship with the cultivation families. Then, how does the Imperial Thunder sect restrict these disciples? Aren't they afraid of being swallowed by those aristocratic families? Ha ha! Xiang Yang laughed loudly and said, "How is this complicated? These are just the disciples that they have recruited. You forgot that my Imperial Thunder sect also has disciples. Their influence is the greatest." Seeing that Xian Yang didn't answer the question, Xiaohua carefully pondered and understood. He said with a smile, "So in the Imperial Thunder sect, the greatest influence is still Xiang Jili's group. In that case, we don't have to be afraid of the aristocratic family's disciples wreaking havoc. More than that? You think that all the disciples registering in the Jade Archive Hall and leaving behind their jade tablets is just a formality? Xiangyang said with a smile. With the Jade Archive Hall's jade tablets, the sect master has 10,000 ways to restrict the disciples of the sect. Hearing this, Xiaohua's heart trembled, and he secretly said, Good, so they aren't good people. Looking at Xiangyang, he seemed to have thought of something and opened his mouth to ask. Xiaohua was afraid that he would ask about the golden brilliance on the jade tablets, so he hurriedly asked. In that case, the ordinary disciples should be divided into the Imperial Thunder Sect's own disciples, the disciples of the cultivation families, and loose cultivators, right? And exactly so. This is also a rough division. There are many subdivisions, and Senior Marshal Brother doesn't know much about them. Xiangyang smiled bitterly. Senior Marshal Brother's achievements are limited when he wholeheartedly cultivates. How can I have so many thoughts like them? I'm afraid that only with such thoughts can you obtain more, right? Xiaohua said with a smile. That's what Master said too. Xiangyang nodded and said, Unfortunately, Senior Marshal Brother and Master aren't that kind of people. We only know how to wholeheartedly cultivate, and don't know how to curry favor with others. We also don't know how to speak human language when we see ghosts. Haha, Senior Marshal Brother, aren't you talking about Junior Marshal Brother? Xiaohua had seen Helpless' performance in the Spring Thunder Palace, so he understood Xiangyang's meaning very well. He waved his hand and said with a smile, Of course, my Myriad Thunder Valley needs people like Junior Marshal Brother. Xiangyang said sincerely. Senior Marshal Brother is too weak, too indecisive. That's why I ended up being laughed at by others. Senior Marshal Brother's words seem to have some illusions. Xiaohua's heart moved and asked. Xiangyang sighed and said, Actually, it's simple. Senior Marshal Brother was similar to you in the past. Although I was also from a cultivation family, it had long since declined and was no different from a loose cultivator. It wasn't easy to enter the Imperial Thunder Sect, but no one accepted me as a disciple. My situation was similar to yours. In the end, a master accepted me into the Myriad Thunder Valley. Senior Marshal Brother was already at the peak of the 11th layer of the aura refining realm at that time, and my cultivation speed wasn't slow either. However, when Senior Marshal Brother entered the peak of the 12th layer of the aura refining realm, Master and Master's wife had something to do and left the Thunder Mo Mountains. Moreover, something went wrong and they left for a long time. Senior Marshal Uncle Qinghua's situation at that time was similar to today's. Whether he was alive or dead was unknown. At that time, Senior Marshal Brother hadn't dual cultivated with your sister-in-law yet. In the Thunder Palace, a master coveted the Myriad Thunder Valley, and wanted to accept Senior Marshal Brother as a disciple. If Senior Marshal Brother left the Myriad Thunder Valley, then there wouldn't be anyone left in the Myriad Thunder Valley. At that time, whether Master was alive or dead was unknown. Myriad Thunder Valley could only be given to someone else. Senior Marshal Brother remembered Master's kindness and didn't dare to agree. I guarded the Myriad Thunder Valley to the death. Even when that Master promised to help me cultivate to the foundation building realm, I didn't leave. Junior Marshal Brother must already know how powerful the Myriad Thunder Valley is. Without the cultivation of the foundation building realm, one can't get close to it for too long. And because Senior Marshal Brother guarded the Myriad Thunder Valley, so... Looking at Xiangyang's aged face and listening to Xiangyang's tireless narration, Xiaohua felt very warm in his heart. He gave a thumbs up and said, Senior Marshal Brother, this is righteousness. Junior Marshal Brother really admires you. Admire? Hee. Xiangyang shook his head. In front of cultivation, everything is nothingness. What is righteousness? What is reason? What is integrity? What is shame? It can't even compare to the cultivation of the Tao. Sigh. Xiaohua let out a long sigh. Looking at the mountain range that was getting closer and closer in the distance, he said helplessly, Yes, a person who cultivates the Tao only has the word Tao. As long as they can increase their cultivation, as long as they can live forever, they can use any method. But with this kind of approach, even if they can live forever, even if they cultivate to the nascent soul stage or the spirit-severing stage, then, what joy is there in that? A person isn't a fish. How can he know the joy of a fish? Xian Yang shook his head. Maybe they were right, and we were wrong. Xiaohua caught on and said. Or maybe they were wrong, and we were right? Who is right and who is wrong, I'm afraid only the heavens can know. And thousands of years later they might laugh at our withered bones. Xian Yang said very profoundly. Knowing this, you should know why Senior Marshal Brother is being laughed at like this, right? I don't want the opportunity to step into the foundation building realm, and instead bitterly cultivate by myself. -6. Chapter 1549. Oh, and then? Didn't Master and Master's wife come back? Xiaohua asked curiously. Master did come back, but I failed to build my foundation for the first time. Later, my mind was hurt by the thunder in 10,000 Thunder Valley. After cultivating for 50 years, I barely entered the early stage of foundation establishment. After that, I didn't have any great achievements. First time building your foundation? Again? Xiaohua muttered in his heart, but he didn't ask. Instead, he smiled and said, Hee, eldest senior brother, did you regret it? Hee, it would be a lie to say I didn't regret it. Xian Yang didn't hide it and said with a smile, But there are countless spiritual medicines in this world, but there is no medicine for regret. What if there is? Xiaohua asked. But there isn't. Xian Yang shook his head. If Master knew, he would be sad. Xiaohua said with a smile. Master? Xian Yang's face showed a strange smile. Seeing the strange expression on Xian Yang's face, Xiaohua was even more curious and said, What did Master say? Did he praise you greatly? Forget it. Xian Yang snorted and said, Master and Master's wife came back a few years later. They didn't say a word to me about what happened. While they were recuperating, they called me to the cave. I thought they were going to praise me, but who would have thought that Master would scold me to my face? Ah? Scolding? Xiaohua was stunned. With a disciple like eldest senior brother, how could Master not be happy? How could he scold you? Master said I was an idiot. I didn't walk the path to heaven and insisted on taking the mountain path. Also, because of my stubbornness, my Tao foundation was damaged. In the future, my cultivation couldn't advance much. Not to mention nascent soul, I couldn't even reach golden core. He also said he was blind to take a fancy to me as a disciple and insisted on driving me out of 10,000 Thunder Valley. He also said that this 10,000 Thunder Valley was a difficult job. He wanted to return it to Thunder Palace long ago, but no one took it. Therefore, he had no choice but to keep guarding here. Now that someone has set their sights on him, it's his best chance to escape. Now that I've messed things up, he'll have to stay in this myriad Thunder Valley again. And then? Xiaohua was very puzzled. After that, I knelt in front of Master's cave for 7 days and 7 nights. Finally, under the persuasion of Master's wife, Master calmed down a little and reluctantly allowed me to return to the wooden house to reflect on my mistakes. That's strange. Xiaohua scratched his head. Since 10,000 Thunder Valley is such a hard job, why did that teacher choose this place? I don't know. After that, no one ever mentioned this matter again. Xian Yang smiled bitterly. It's me who has made a name for myself in the deafening Thunder Palace. Not only in the deafening Thunder Palace, but also in the 8 great Thunder Palaces. Xiaohua scratches his head again. Of course, in the eyes of an ordinary cultivator, Xian Yang is indeed abnormally stupid. For the meaningless loyalty in his heart, he has damaged his Taoist foundation and state of mind. However, he has no choice but to be ungrateful and almost expelled him from the school. If this is not a joke, what else can it be? However, was Tao cultivation as simple as Tao cultivation? How could one cultivate the Tao without cultivating the mind? Even if one's Tao cultivation reached the heavens, without a mind that matches the Tao cultivation, that Tao will never be able to reach perfection. Rumble, rumble, rumble. A loud sound came from the heavenly Tao that was steadily revolving within Xiaohua's space. In these past few years, while Xiaohua was cultivating, he was attaching his mind to the heavenly Tao's starry sky within the space. He slowly comprehended and experienced the traces of the heavenly Tao's circulation, as well as the fluctuations in the circulation of the heavenly Tao. And these so-called comprehensions, Xiaohua actually didn't understand a lot of the time. It's just that when he comprehended, sometimes he would feel sadness, sometimes he would feel joy, and sometimes he would feel neither joy nor sadness. Almost all of the emotions and all of the world's entanglements would appear in this comprehension. As for what use these comprehensions had, Xiaohua didn't know. Of course, when comprehending the heavenly Tao, Xiaohua's cultivation could increase rapidly. This was what Xiaohua knew. He was naturally willing to continue comprehending and wanted to know what the so-called heaven-reaching realm was like. However, it was also the heavenly Tao that Xiaohua had been silently comprehending but had never made any progress. At this time, when he comprehended Xian Yang's sincere heart, the starry sky actually became a little clearer. The details that Xiaohua saw before were very vague at this moment. Even the karma hand had revealed a few traces of the technique. But the Tao heart, how can it reach perfection? What kind of Tao heart is worthy of cultivation? Xiaohua's heart was at a loss, but this couldn't stop Xiaohua's reverence for Xiang Yang. Xiaohua stopped flying, and respectfully bowed and said, "Many thanks to eldest senior brother for teaching me, this little brother will benefit endlessly." "Don't!" Xiang Yang was shocked. He hurriedly pulled Xiaohua up and said, "I told you about my own matters because I don't want you to take a detour like I did. Isn't that, eldest martial brother, what little brother has gained is not what you have gained, and what you have lost is also not what you have lost. Who can know about gains and losses?" Xiaohua took advantage of the situation and said, "Look at Master, I feel that, he is not, what do you think?" Xian Yang blinked and said with a smile, "Admittedly, this elder brother has made some losses, but that senior sister of yours also agreed to this elder brother's dual cultivation because of this. Isn't this a gain?" "Ha, that's right." Xiaohua laughed. Thinking about what Yan Qinglian said to Xian Yang, the concern in her words really made him envious. "However, this elder brother is wrong. Junior brother is too conspicuous, it's also not good," Xiang Yang said again. However, he wasn't helpless after all. His words were still vague. "I'll let senior brother know that this little brother has always endured silently. However, those two things are really hateful. They actually want to delay this little brother's cultivation for a year. How can this little brother endure?" Xiaohua naturally knew what this always cautious senior brother was thinking and explained in a low voice. "And then it's fine. This elder brother will report this matter to Master later and also let him have a plan in his heart. Won't Master be especially happy?" Xiaohua said shamelessly. "Stop dreaming. It's already not bad that he won't punish you." Xian Yang looked at Xiaohua's appearance and couldn't help but pat his head. It seemed similar to his own nephew. Xiaohua slightly frowned. He originally wanted to refuse, but seeing the kindness in Xiang Yang's eyes and thinking about Xiang Yang's sorrow, his heart softened and he let that hand rest on his hair. "Let's go Thunder Palace's rushing Thunder Hall is in front. This elder brother will go and see if there are any senior brothers familiar and find you a comfortable odd job worker." Xiang Yang stroked Xiaohua's hair a few times and sighed in his heart. As soon as his hand left, he urged his magic power and said gently, "Yes, I'll listen to senior brother's instructions." Xiaohua smiled and caught up. Shuttling Thunder Hall was similar to Spring Thunder Hall. However, in the Jade Archive Hall's position, there was a rather large side hall with the words, "Shuttling Thunder Hall," written on it. There were many aura-refining disciples walking into the hall, some with tired faces, some with a trace of joy on their faces. They were holding things that they didn't have time to put in their storage pouches as they hurriedly walked out. This is not only the place to assign odd job workers to Thunder Palace, but it's also the place to hand over the monthly harvest and distribute the offerings. Xian Yang explained in a low voice. Senior brother Xiang. Xian Yang was talking to Xiao Hua with his head lowered when a middle-stage foundation building cultivator turned around from the side of the huge pillar. That cultivator was extremely thin and had a few strands of goatee on his chin. When he saw Xian Yang, a trace of mockery flashed through his eyes. He called out, "Senior brother Xiang," and walked over. "How could I dare? So it's senior brother Jinfeng." When Xian Yang saw that cultivator, his face was full of smiles. He cupped his hands and said, "Senior brother, you can just call me junior brother. I can't accept the title of senior brother." "How could that be? Back then, senior brother Xiang was I's senior brother. You also gave I a lot of pointers on cultivation," Jinfeng said while waving his hand. "That was a matter from several decades ago. Senior brother Jinfeng, please don't mention it." Xian Yang's expression was slightly ashamed. When he saw Xian Yang's ashamed expression, Jinfeng turned his head and looked at Xiao Hua. He pointed at him and said with a smile, "Junior brother Xiang? Could it be that this is the son you said would definitely become a deity transformation stage cultivator? Oh right, I heard that you even gave him a name. What was it again?" Xian Yang's expression changed greatly. He hurriedly waved his hand and said, "Senior brother Jinfeng, don't joke around. This is the disciple my master accepted. He's I's junior brother. This time, I came with him on a mission from Thunder Palace." Soon after, he looked around and said in a low voice, "I just don't know if senior brother can be merciful and find a mission that can increase his cultivation. My myriad Thunder Valley will be eternally grateful." "Hee, of course, of course." Jinfeng laughed and said, "Junior brother Xiang came personally. How can there not be a good mission? My Thunder Palace's great herb garden needs your junior brother to take care of it." Xian Yang's expression changed greatly. He hurriedly pulled Jinfeng's sleeve and said, "The herb garden is far away. Xiao Hua still has to report to Thunder Palace every day. How can this be?" "What? Your master didn't even come to take care of the herb garden and do the hard work?" Jinfeng flung his sleeve and said coldly, "The masters and disciples came to Thunder Palace yesterday. You only came today. What other good place do you want? If you think this herb garden is not good enough, I will let Xiao Hua patrol the mountain." "Don't." Xian Yang also threw away his face. He hurriedly pulled Jinfeng and said in a low voice, "Xiao Hua and Wang Yuxiao are old friends." "Just now, what? Xiao Hua?" Jinfeng suddenly realized. He turned his head and looked at Xiao Hua, whose face was as calm as water. He patted his hand and took out a jade scroll. He immersed his divine sense in it and looked carefully. A trace of surprise flashed in his eyes. He asked in a low voice, "Is it the Xiao that starts with the word grass?" Xian Yang said curiously, "That's right. Could it be that my Thunder Palace has another Xiao Hua this year?" No. Jinfeng concealed his awkwardness, took a deep breath, and a smile appeared on his face. He turned around and said to Xiao Hua, "Haha, this poor Taoist was wondering who it was. So it turns out that it's someone that palace master thinks highly of. It's only right for me to come later." -6. Chapter 1550. Someone that palace master values? Xian Yang suddenly remembered Xiao Hua's sect master's token and unconsciously felt bitter in his heart. "Of course, I've always been Loki. Since Xiao Hua has the sect master's token, what do I have to worry about?" Xiao Hua's expression didn't change as he said indifferently, "I don't dare. Junior has only seen sect master a few times. I can't say that he values me." A few times. Junior brother Xiao makes it sound so simple." Jinfeng was still full of smiles as he said, "Palace master has already sent a message to my rushing Thunder Hall's deacon. Junior brother Xiao can choose any of my shocking Thunder Hall's odd job workers. Isn't this valuing you?" Xian Yang secretly sucked in a breath of cold air. He had never heard of this kind of situation before. Xiaohua didn't even lift his eyelids as he said, Senior's arrangement is exactly what Junior likes. I just don't know which herb garden is the most deserted. Junior will only take that herb garden's job. Don't. Jinfeng was very anxious as he hurriedly shouted. Junior brother Xiao, I have already arranged junior brother's position properly since I received the deacon's order. It's the talisman crafting job. I blocked more than 10 senior brothers and martial uncles to make this arrangement. I hope junior brother will be satisfied, Jinfeng said anxiously. No need. Xiaohua slightly shook his head. Junior still feels that the herb garden's job is better. Junior brother, Xian Yang softly shouted. Now is not the time to be angry. That herb garden is very far from here. Every day, you have to go there and come back. It's not good for your cultivation. If junior brother doesn't like talisman crafting, why don't you find an alchemy master and become their alchemy boy? You can also gain something. Alchemy boy? Xiaohua thought in his heart, but he felt relieved right after that. At this moment, he was already capable of refining medicinal pills, and his technique was slightly different from Dawn Rain Continent. Even if he found a master capable of refining pills to observe from the side, then, wouldn't he be looking for trouble for himself? Xiaohua firmly shook his head. Thank you, Senior. Junior wants to go to the herb garden. Senior brother Xiang. Jinfeng turned his head, the way he addressed him changed again. Xian Yang sighed and pulled Xiaohua to the side as he asked in a low voice. Junior brother, why do you want to go to the herb garden? It's hard and tiring, and you can't even see any results. You're even more disliked than the guards in my myriad Thunder Valley. Hee, eldest senior brother, I don't have any ideas. We've just offended the disciple on duty in the Jade Archive Hall. Why don't we quickly find a remote place to hide? What's the point of showing off in front of others? The less trouble, the better. Isn't that what you just said? But our Thunderclap Palace's herb garden is really very desolate. Even if something happens, no one will know. Sigh, it's not convenient for me to tell you clearly. Master's wife said it well. Where there are people, there will be fighting. But what if there are no people? What is it? Xian Yang seemed to be really worried about Xiaohua's future, and said anxiously. Oh? Xiaohua, of course, understood. His eyes narrowed slightly before he smiled and said, Thank you for your reminder, eldest senior brother. Little brother already understands. Oh, that's good. Xian Yang let out a sigh of relief, but Xiaohua's next sentence made him choke. Little brother still wants to go to the medicinal garden. Oh. All right. Xian Yang looked at the stunned Xiaohua and sighed. This is your own choice. It's not good for me to interfere. And, if eldest senior brother can choose, then little brother can also choose. Xiaohua smiled. When Xian Yang and Xiaohua came over, Jinfeng smiled apologetically and said, How is it? Hee, senior brother Jin, I've troubled you. My little junior brother insists on going to the medicinal garden. As a senior brother, what can I say? Xian Yang said. Senior brother Jin, please go to a slightly more convenient place. Sigh, how should I say this? Senior brother Jin also didn't understand. He looked at Xiaohua and then at Xian Yang. Why did all the stubborn disciples go to your myriad Thunder Valley? Jinfeng clapped his hands and took out a jade tablet. He tapped it, and the jade tablet emitted a misty green light and flashed with a few diagrams. Jinfeng looked at it and pointed. My thunderous palace has a total of 34 medicinal gardens. Right now, there are still 6 that no one is looking after. They are slightly closer to my thunderous palace. Oh, if junior brother Xiao is willing, you can wait for a few days. I will give you the medicinal garden closest to thunderous palace. No need, I'll take those 6. Xiaohua shook his head. I just don't know what's the difference between these 6. Jinfeng glanced at the jade tablet and smiled. These 6 places are all places with insufficient world energy. One of them even has an abandoned earth fire. It's precisely because of this that no one goes there. The others are the same as the other medicinal gardens. Abandoned earth fire? Xiaohua was overjoyed, but he didn't show it. He said, I'll have to trouble Senior to point out these places for me to see. No problem. Seeing Xiaohua still calling him Senior, Jinfeng lost the thought of roping him in. He straightened his face and pointed out each place. And I presume that this medicinal garden with an abandoned earth fire is slightly closer to Myriad Thunder Valley? Xiaohua looked for a while and smiled. Indeed, but it's not very close. Jinfeng frowned. That medicinal garden was the most barren, and the herbs had long been left to grow on their own. This was indeed not a very good choice. This kind of medicinal garden doesn't turn in a lot of spiritual herbs? Xiaohua smiled. Jinfeng rolled his eyes and smiled. Others naturally can't be left out, but junior brother Xiao? That's a different story. Xiaohua cupped his hands and gave a rare smile to Jinfeng. Then I'll have to thank senior brother Jinfeng. You're welcome, you're welcome. Jinfeng was immediately overjoyed. He pointed his hand and the medicinal garden changed into another color. He then said, Junior brother Xiao, please wait for a moment. I'll get you the token now. After saying that, he hurriedly left. Damn it! Looking at Jinfeng's back as he hurriedly left, Xiaohua felt that it was funny. This young master has called this fellow senior so many times, but I don't see him being happy. Why is he so happy when I call him senior brother? Is Qian Lazy's token so useful? Just as he was thinking, Xian Yang clapped his hand and took out 1,000 miles sound transmission talisman. He handed it to Xiaohua. Junior brother, this is a sound transmission talisman refined by your senior sister. It's much slower than the lightning sound transmission talisman. However, with your cultivation, you can only use this. Keep it well. If there's any mishap in the medicinal garden, or if there's any trouble, quickly send it out. Xiaohua's heart warmed. He received it and put it into his storage pouch. He smiled and said, Thank you, senior brother. Not long after, Jinfeng rushed back and handed over a token. He smiled and said, Junior brother Xiao, please keep it well. This token is the certificate to open the Eastern Ridge Medicinal Garden. As for how to use it, it's the same as the other tokens of my Imperial Thunder sect. And many thanks, senior brother Jinfeng. Xiaohua received it and smiled. You're welcome, junior brother Xiao. I am very familiar with the Eastern Ridge Medicinal Gardens roads. When are you going? Senior brother will take you there. Jinfeng's face was full of enthusiasm. No need, senior brother Jinfeng. Junior brother will go by himself. Xiaohua cupped his hands and bid farewell to Jinfeng. Jinfeng actually didn't care about other people's gazes and sent Xiaohua out. After Jinfeng turned and returned to the Thunder Hall, Xiaohua turned and asked Xian Yang. Senior brother, where is my Thunderous Thunder Palace's cultivation manual and cultivation place? Senior brother Jinfeng teaches cultivation techniques in the Thunder Hall every day, and the essence is different every day. Sometimes it's basic cultivation techniques, sometimes it's cultivation techniques, and most of the time there are also explanations on alchemy and talisman crafting. The cultivation manual is also in the Thunder Hall. However, junior brother, you can just go and listen to the cultivation manual. Why do you want to find the cultivation manual? Xian Yang's patient explanation was a little strange. Xiaohua smiled but didn't explain. He said, Oh right, senior brother, what cultivation technique do you want to see but can't see? Me? Xian Yang smiled bitterly. Senior brother has only received master's teachings. Senior brother can't completely comprehend his little things. Although other cultivation techniques are good, senior brother has never thought about them. It can't be, right? Xiaohua really didn't understand Xian Yang's attitude of not wanting to look at cultivation techniques. When he was outside the Thunder Palace, he tried his best to find cultivation techniques to comprehend. Don't bite off more than you can chew, junior brother. Xian Yang smiled. When you cultivate to foundation establishment, you'll understand this principle. You only need one cultivation technique to cultivate to gold core. Why waste time looking for other cultivation techniques? Oh, so it's like that. Xiaohua suddenly understood why Master Qianlei gave him the command medallion. Although this command medallion allowed him to see the cultivation manual of the 8 great thunder palaces, but could he cultivate it? However, your senior sister has always wanted to obtain the refining method of the invisibility talisman. Unfortunately, that thing is kept in the Thunder Palace and can't be taken out. Junior brother, I'm afraid you have the heart but not the strength, right? Xiangyang said casually. Hey, junior brother thought it was something special. Xiaohua was happy when he heard this. He clapped his hands and took out the refining method of the invisibility talisman. He handed it over and said, No need to go to the Thunder Palace, junior brother has it here. What? Invisibility talisman? Xianyang was very happy. He took it out and looked at it in disbelief. Unfortunately, how could he understand it? He asked again. How can you have this thing? Senior brother, don't ask about this. First, give this thing to senior sister to comprehend. When you finish practicing, just give it back to junior brother. Xianyang looked at Xiaohua with a somewhat complicated gaze. He nodded firmly and put the booklet into his pocket. Let's go, senior brother. I'll have to trouble you to take junior brother to the Thunder Palace. Junior brother really does want to look for some ancient books to read, Xiaohua said with a smile. You really want to go? Xianyang asked curiously. You've just reached Qi refinement. You don't have the qualifications to look at the ancient books in the Thunder Palace. You can only go to Master's Cave to look for cultivation techniques to read. Then don't worry about it. Xiaohua waved his hand as if he was the senior brother. You take junior brother there first. Okay. Although Xianyang was suspicious, he still took Xiaohua to the Thunder Palace. Along the way, Xianyang still met many Foundation Establishment disciples. When those disciples saw Xianyang, they all smiled. The first thing they asked was about Xiangjili. Xianyang was also good at self-restraint. He calmly responded with a smile on his face. In the end, even Xiaohua almost believed that Xianyang, the senior brother of the early Foundation Establishment stage, would definitely have a deification stage son in the future. Between a steep cliff, there was a huge ancient palace half floating in the clouds. Xiaohua said with a smile. Is this the derived Thunder Palace? Why is it so much more wonderful than the Thunder Palace? Wonderful? Xianyang, who was in the air, almost laughed out loud. Junior brother used the word wonderful very well. Ha ha! Xiaohua smiled apologetically. Suddenly he remembered something and said in a low voice. Right, senior brother, that jade slip can be read and written with divine sense, right? Yes? Xiangyang said. Although aura refining stage cultivators have divine sense, they can only read it. If they want to write it, they can only do it at the Foundation Establishment stage. Or peak aura refining stage cultivators with especially strong divine sense can also do it. Senior brother, do you have these techniques? Xiaohua thought for a moment and asked. Of course I do. This thing is just an ordinary technique for Foundation Establishment cultivators. All Foundation Establishment cultivators of my thunder-controlling sect have it. Xianyang clapped his hands and took out a thin booklet. Why are you asking this? Nothing, junior brother is just curious about the mystery of this technique. I want to see the trick. Xiaohua stared at the booklet and asked. Junior brother won't give senior brother any trouble with this technique, right? How is that possible? Xianyang handed it to Xiaohua. This thing is just a waste paper in the thunder-controlling sect. What kind of trouble will there be? That's good. Xiaohua took it and carefully put it away. Not long after, Xiaohua and Xianyang arrived in front of the Yanlei Palace. This was not the time to pass on techniques. The entire Yanlei Palace was covered in a layer of light purple brilliance. Layers of ripples were rippling within it, as if the entire Yanlei Palace was under the water. Xianyang walked closer and waved his hand. A red brilliance flew into the brilliance. After a moment, the brilliance was torn apart. A foundation establishment middle stage cultivator slowly walked out. Looking at Xiaohua and Xiangyang, he frowned and said, "This is not the time to pass on techniques. Do the two of you have any business?" "Senior brother, I am Xianyang from the Myriad Thunder Valley." "This is my junior brother Xiaohua." Xianyang stepped forward and cupped his hands. Of course I know you're Xianyang." The disciple didn't mention anything about Xiangjuli. He nodded slightly and said, "Could it be that junior brother Xiang wants to enter the technique imparting pavilion to comprehend other techniques?" Xiaohua hurriedly stepped forward and clapped his hands. He took out the sect master's token and said with a smile, "It's not about senior brother. Junior wants to enter the technique imparting pavilion." "You!" The cultivator stared blankly. With a wave of his hand, the sect master's token appeared in his hand. As he examined it with his divine sense, a trace of amazement appeared in the cultivator's eyes. He then returned the sect master's token to Xiaohua and said with a nod, "Since you have the sect master's token, you can naturally enter and take a look. However, Xiaohua, you're only allowed to examine the sect master's token in the technique imparting pavilion. You can't take any ancient books and other things out of the Yanlei Palace." "Good." Xiaohua clapped his hands and said with a smile, "Then, with this sect master's token, can I occasionally enter the technique imparting pavilions of the other 7 lightning palaces to take a look?" "The sect master's token is issued to the attendants of each lightning palace. You can naturally enter with this sect master's token." The foundation establishment cultivator recovered his previous calmness and said, "Xiaohua, do you want to enter and take a look now?" "No need." "Thank you, senior." Xiaohua bowed and thanked him happily in his heart. Knowing that Xiaohua only wanted to see if this sect master's token was effective, the foundation establishment cultivator looked at Xiaohua with disdain. He nodded and was about to turn around. "That's right, senior, please wait a moment." Xiaohua suddenly thought of something and said urgently, "Xiaohua, what else do you want?" "Junior has just arrived. I want to ask, does our technique imparting pavilion have the 5 elements escape technique?" 5 elements escape technique? Of course there is. The foundation establishment cultivator nodded. When you reach the foundation establishment stage, your master will naturally impart this 5 elements escape technique to you. Xiaohua said curiously. 5 elements escape technique. Aren't there 5 types of escape techniques? Of course not. My Imperial Thunder sect only has the 5 elements escape technique. There are no separate 5 elements escape techniques. The foundation establishment cultivator said with a smile. As long as you use the 5 elements escape technique, all of the 5 elements in this world can escape. Why would you need to cultivate them one by one? Oh, what senior says makes sense. Xiaohua nodded. Then the lightning escape technique, can I look at it now? Of course you can. Do you want to go in? The foundation establishment cultivator nodded in response. At this moment, Xian Yang tugged on Xiaohua's sleeves. -6. Chapter 1551. Seeing Xian Yang pull on Xiaohua's sleeve, the foundation establishment cultivator naturally knew what Xian Yang meant. The corner of his mouth slightly twitched as he said, "The lightning escape technique is unique to our lightning sect. Any disciple who has the aptitude to practice the lightning escape technique is encouraged to practice it. Your Myriad Thunder Valley naturally also has this technique. You should wait for senior brother Wu Xian to teach you the most basic 5 elements escape technique before you consider the lightning escape technique." "Oh, thank you for your guidance. Disciple won't be going in today." Xiaohua bowed and thanked him. That foundation establishment cultivator nodded and disappeared in a flash of light. Xian Yang pulled Xiaohua and flew away. He whispered, "Why are you looking at the lightning escape technique? That technique can only be practiced by foundation establishment cultivators. If it's not of the lightning attribute, it's extremely difficult to practice. I'm only at the entry level and haven't mastered it yet. I don't dare to use it normally." Senior brother, do you have this technique? Xiaohua smiled. I do, but it's in my cave. Xiang Yang asked curiously. What do you want it for? If it's convenient for senior brother, how about you give it to me tomorrow? Xiaohua giggled. Master told me to guide you in your cultivation. This thing, Sai, even if I don't give it to you, you can find it in the Technique Inheritance Pavilion. Why wouldn't I give it to you? Xiang Yang smiled and said, Go back to Zhenlei Palace first. Tomorrow, I'll bring you to the Eastern Ridge Herb Garden and give it to you. Aren't we going to Eastern Ridge now? Xiaohua asked curiously. Of course not today. Let's wait for tomorrow. Xiang Yang looked at the sky and said, I still have something to do, so I won't bring you back to Zhenlei Palace. Do you remember the way back? Please go ahead, senior brother. Although I don't remember it clearly, I can still ask someone. Xiaohua cupped his hands and said, Okay, I'll come back tomorrow. Xiang Yang's figure flew up as if he really did have something urgent. When he was in the air, he said, I thank you on behalf of your senior sister. You're welcome, you're welcome. Looking at Xiang Yang's figure that left in a hurry, Xiaohua smiled for no reason and secretly said, This eldest senior brother is rather interesting. I'm afraid it's hard to find someone with this kind of character in the entire Dawn Rain continent. After that, Xiaohua identified the direction and flew towards Zhenlei Palace at a leisurely pace. But after flying for 2 hours, Xiaohua was at a loss. He really was lost. The Leiemo mountain range where the Imperial Thunder sect was located was extremely large. There were many towering peaks and continuous forests. Many places looked similar. With Xiaohua's very low sense of direction, and they were exactly the same. As expected, I got lost again. Xiaohua felt extremely helpless. Looking at this unfamiliar place, he scratched his head and looked around. Unfortunately, he didn't know where this place was. The barren hills and unruly rivers beneath his feet were far from the usual fairyland. Motherfucker, could it have flown out of the Imperial Thunder sect? Xiaohua didn't dare to fly forward anymore. He turned around and prepared to fly back. However, just as he flew for the time it took to brew a cup of tea, the scene in front of him suddenly changed at a rapid speed. The magic power in his body was imprisoned at the same time. His body plummeted down like a stone. Ouch! Xiaohua cried out in his heart. He knew he had fallen into someone else's formation. Just as he was about to struggle, a silhouette hurriedly flew over from afar. It was a late-stage Foundation establishment cultivator using lightning escape. Senior! Xiaohua had just called out when he immediately stopped. Setting up a formation in this desolate and uninhabited place, there must be some kind of scheme. Wouldn't it be ruining other people's plans for him to barge in unknowingly? He didn't even consider how to escape. Instead, he wanted the other party to save him. Wasn't that a fool's dream? Looking at the cultivator again, he had a round face. His eyebrows were slightly drooping from the corners of his eyes. Below his eyebrows, his eyes were slightly narrowed. His 2 gray pupils flashed with an astonished expression. Huh! How could an aura-refining disciple appear here? When the cultivator scanned with his divine sense, he immediately understood. He muttered to himself, and urged the magic power in his body to activate the formation to kill Xiaohua. But right at that moment, the cultivator's expression slightly changed. He slightly tilted his head and looked in another direction. He said in a low voice, The time has come. That guy really did keep his promise. If I kill this little disciple, I'm afraid it'll cause a change in the spiritual aura of heaven and earth. As he said that, the cultivator changed the hand seal in his hand and attacked Xiaohua. Xiaohua, who had fallen into the air, felt his body tighten. He couldn't even move. Soon after, he felt light again and drifted down like a feather. Soon after, the cultivator hastily took out a small triangular flag from his storage pouch and urged his magic power to wave it a few times in the air. Several rays of light flashed, and Xiaohua's figure disappeared. Everything in the surroundings also returned to its original state. Not even the slightest fluctuation of spiritual aura of heaven and earth leaked out. Once everything was done, the cultivator carefully put away the small flag and used his divine sense to scan the surroundings again. Only then did he fly in another direction. Why am I so unlucky? Xiaohua was imprisoned by a late-stage foundation-building cultivator. He was like a little chick without the slightest power to resist. The magic power in his body couldn't be mobilized in the slightest. He could only use his pure physical strength to struggle, wanting to break free from the shackles. Unfortunately, the opponent had a late-stage foundation-building cultivator's great confinement technique and the power of a formation. How could Xiaohua struggle? After several attempts, he couldn't even move his fingers. Xiaohua could only give up dejectedly and think of another way. That formation was also mysterious. Xiaohua's figure couldn't be seen from the outside, but from Xiaohua's point of view, he could see the scene outside the formation. Moreover, the sound of the wind passing through the air indicated that he could still hear that voice. Is this late-stage foundation-building cultivator from the Imperial Thunder sect? And, since he knows the lightning evasion technique, he should be from the Imperial Thunder sect. But which Thunder Palace is he from? Why did he set up an ambush here? In this critical moment, Xiaohua unconsciously thought of many things in his mind. But in the end, Xiaohua unconsciously became discouraged. His grandmother, no matter what this guy wants to do in the end. I'm afraid I'll become a ghost under his hands. Heavens, how can I be so unlucky? It was like this in Yellow Flower Ridge. Just as I saw the dawn of cultivation and could use the Peiyuan pill to cultivate to the second layer of the aura refining realm, Shang Huaming was exterminated by the 100 Herbs sect. Thanks to Senior Martial Sister, I escaped from Yellow Flower Ridge with great difficulty. Then, I met Heaven Forsaken. I originally thought I could cultivate some kind of cultivation technique in Heaven Forsaken, but Heaven Forsaken was a devil's trap. Fortunately, my character was good. I met Li Zongbao and Kai Zhuoxia and escaped from 100 Zhang Peak. Then, with great difficulty, I found an opportunity to participate in the disciple selection of Rinsing Flower sect. I spent a lot of effort to fight for the opportunity, but it was snatched away by Rinsing Flower sect's predetermined disciple. Then, with great difficulty, I obtained a cultivation technique from the auction. I was preparing to find a place to cultivate in peace. But for the Fire Essence Flame Crystal, I had no choice but to go to Flame Forest Swamp. In the end, I obtained the Fire Essence Flame Crystal, but Kai Zhuoxia lost her life. I simply sent Kai Zhuoxia's body to Luyang, but unfortunately, I met the Kai family's Grand Elder and was chased by him until I pissed my pants. Fortunately, I was not destined to die and met Qian Qinghua. But who would have thought that this guy was also not a good person? He placed a restriction on my meridians and gave me the clear flower pill. I had no choice but to give him the thunder-devouring bead. Damn it, I was being hunted down by the 3 major sects in the country of Xi. Those were 4 foundation establishment cultivators. I'm afraid no one would believe me if I told them. Sigh, was it easy for me to get to Thunderclap Peak? I passed 3 tests, tested my attributes, tested my bone age, and even passed through an illusion array. It was not easy for me to enter the Imperial Thunder sect. I finally had a master to guide me, and I even met a good senior martial brother. I thought I could embark on the normal path of cultivation from now on. But why am I so unlucky? Taking the wrong path can even bring about a fatal disaster? Sigh, I'm afraid I won't be able to see the beautiful Red Dawn Fairy again. I wonder how her cultivation in the Huanhua sect is going. Sigh, shue, I brought you to the Imperial Thunder sect. I wonder if you'll still remember to follow me when you become a Foundation Establishment cultivator in a few years. Xiaohua's imagination was running wild. His mind was filled with Fairy Hongxia's fairy-like beauty for a while, Shue's curvy figure and shy face for a while, and even the graceful and luxurious face of that mysterious goddess appeared for some inexplicable reason. But at this moment, Xiaohua suddenly quivered. He thought of Goldie, who was in his space. The heavens have not forsaken me! Xiaohua suddenly had a ray of hope. Xiao Hua himself could not move, but there were things in his space that could move. Goldie and the puppet could help him, right? However, Xiao Hua was only pleasantly surprised for a moment before he became dejected again. Goldie and the puppet were in the space, so his mind could also enter the space. However, he used to use his hands to hold things. Now, he could not even move his hands, so how could he hold things? Sigh, pitiful Goldie, your mother is going to be finished soon. I wonder if you can still live? Xiao Hua thought, and his mind entered the space. However, when he saw everything in the space, he could not help but be dumbstruck. What do you think? He saw a clever little white mouse flying around in a range of several zhang. Goldie was curled up in the middle of this range. The little white mouse ran in front of Goldie, and used its nose to rub against Goldie's big tail. Then, it flew on Goldie's back and used its small tail to curl around Goldie's back. After a while, it rushed into the air and chirped towards tracing back the light above its head. Because of the little white mouse flying around, the entire space was filled with a strange vitality. Immediately, Xiao Hua's gloomy mood became much better. Goldie? What is this guy doing? Xiao Hua asked in a low voice. This thing thinks I'm its mother. Goldie was still somewhat weak, and said in a low voice. I remember that a few days ago, it was still not awake. How come it's so lively today? How would I know, mother? In any case, when it woke up, it circled around me and was very affectionate with me. Goldie did not need to open its mouth, so it spoke smoothly. I was afraid it would mess up mother's things, so I didn't let it go far away. It really listened to me. And, Xiao Hua said, and again paid attention to the seeking spirit mouse. This spirit-seeking mouse looked exactly the same as the one Xiao Hua had seen in the sobbing Ming Mountains. However, on the tip of this spirit-seeking mouse's nose, there was an indistinct golden line. -6. Chapter 1553. Chirp, 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 chirp. The spirit-seeking mouse seemed to have sensed something and stopped flying in midair. It raised its small head and looked around in a daze, its small nose twitching incessantly. Ai, pitiful little guy, it can only move now. I'm afraid it'll have to follow me. Xiao Hua was sad again. He looked at the things in the space and the reversed light in midair, and withdrew his consciousness. Since I can use my hands too. Xiao Hua naturally didn't give up. He was still thinking, but just as his consciousness withdrew, he suddenly realized something. Damn it, I'm such an idiot! I use my hands to take things because I'm a person with hands. I'm naturally used to using my hands. Moreover, I only thought of using my hands when I saw other cultivators use their hands to take things out of storage bags. However, my space is different from a storage bag. My hands can't reach into the space, so how can I use my hands to take things out? I'm just used to using my hands to do this, so I naturally think I'm using my hands to take things out of the space. The thing that's really taking things out of the space isn't my hands, but my consciousness. Thinking of this, Xiao Hua was pleasantly surprised and apprehensive. He hurriedly sent his consciousness into the space. He didn't dare to try using Goldie and the puppet first, so he only locked his consciousness onto a spirit stone. Soon after, his imprisoned left hand naturally struggled, and the spirit stone strangely appeared in Xiao Hua's left hand. Haha, I told you, this young master is a genius! Xiao Hua immediately laughed in his heart, but just as he put the spirit stone into the space and wanted to take Goldie and the puppet out, the sound of something breaking through the air came from above his head. Crap, that guy came back so quickly? Xiao Hua hurriedly stopped his movements and closed his eyes. He immediately released his perception, but unfortunately it was blocked by the formation after only a few dozen feet. At this time, two people's voices came from above Xiao Hua's head. One of them was the person who set up the formation. That person laughed and said, Senior Marshal Brother Kinmingwei, what do you think of this place? My Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples rarely come here, right? Another slightly older voice said, What Junior Brother Jinxia is looking for is really a wonderful place. The spiritual energy here is scarce, so no one will stay here for long. If there's anything in the future, let's meet here. Sure. We'll do as Senior Apprentice Brotherkin says. May I know why Junior Marshal Brotherkin sent this message? What else could it be? I wonder if Senior Apprentice Brotherkin was able to find out the origin of that item in the Canlay Palace? Where is Junior Marshal Brotherkin? Does your Thunderclap Palace have any records of this? Can Mingwei asked. Sigh, if I found out, would I still be able to ask Senior Marshal Brother? I feel the same, Can Mingwei said regretfully. I have flipped through almost all the books and records in the Carei Palace's Martial Teaching Pavilion, and also asked many masters indirectly, but I couldn't find any trace of it. Don't tell me, the thing we've worked so hard to find is a piece of trash? Evilgen hesitated. Why don't we take it to the faction leader? Perhaps the old man would know. If it's really a treasure, we can offer it to the faction leader. I'm afraid we can get some rewards. This? Can Mingwei rolled his eyes, cupped his hands and said, Junior Marshal Brotherkin is really smart. I have never thought about this problem. I always wanted to keep it for myself and find out the origin of this treasure together with Junior Marshal Brotherkin. I naturally want to do the same. Evilgen nodded. It's a pity that this thing has 36 slots. Only 17 of them have something in them. Who knows where the other 19 slots have things in them? If we can't find out the origin of this treasure, we won't be able to find the other 16 things. Since that's the case, we might as well show it to the faction leader. Alright, since Junior Marshal Brotherkin has the same idea as I, let's go to the 10,000 Thunder Palace. Can Mingwei said with a smile. Senior Marshal Brotherkin, what about the treasure? Of course. Can Mingwei nodded slightly. But at this moment, Evilgen turned his head and released his divine sense, sweeping it towards the magic array. He shouted, Who is it? Then, without calling out to Can Mingwei, he flew towards the spell formation. Who is it? Can Mingwei was also shocked. Seeing Evilgen fly up, he patted his hand and took out a flying sword from his storage bag. He used his Dharma power, and the flying sword grew to 1 foot long. He held it in his hand and chased after Evilgen. Naturally, when Can Mingwei flew above the magic array, Evilgen had already left the range of the magic array. When Evilgen saw Can Mingwei enter the magic array, he immediately stopped and took out a small triangular flag. He spread it in the air and a misty green light hit the magic array. With a swoosh, a ray of light appeared from the ground and blocked Can Mingwei in the magic array. Can Mingwei was also a late-stage Foundation establishment cultivator. When he saw Evilgen's strange behavior, he immediately became vigilant and hurriedly flew back. Unfortunately, he was still a step too late. The misty green light happened to block his way. Can Mingwei was shocked. He used his divine sense to see the whole magic array clearly. He also saw Xiaohua, who seemed to be motionless under the magic array. His expression changed greatly and he shouted, Junior Marshal Brotherkin, what are you doing? Ha. When Evilgen saw the misty green light form a ball and cover Can Mingwei, he laughed and spread out the small flag again. In the space inside the magic array, layers of fine orange flames appeared and surrounded Can Mingwei. Senior Marshal Brotherkin, don't tell me you don't know what I'm doing. Can Mingwei's expression was gloomy. He sneered and said, Junior Marshal Brotherkin, you set up a trap here and lured I into the magic array. Do you want to kill me and keep that thing for yourself? What? Could it be that Senior Marshal Brotherkin didn't have this idea? Evilgen sneered and said, Didn't Senior Marshal Brotherkin take advantage of the fact that I was injured at the Buddhist sect's ruins to make the first move and keep the exquisite pagoda in your own storage pouch? If I didn't pretend to be uninjured and let Senior Marshal Brotherkin take the exquisite pagoda, wouldn't Senior Marshal Brotherkin have already killed I? Ah? You're actually injured? Can Mingwei was somewhat astonished. He then snorted and said, You really know the origin of this thing? Could it be that Senior Marshal Brotherkin doesn't know? Evilgen said complacently, My Thunderquake Palace certainly doesn't have any records of the Buddhist sect. Your Thunderquake Palace probably doesn't either. But what about Thunderquake Palace and Thunderquake Palace? This exquisite pagoda was the most famous Buddhist treasure before the Buddhist sect was annihilated. How could my Thunderquake sect not have any records of it? Even if Junior Marshal Brother Jean knows that this is the exquisite pagoda, but you wouldn't go so far as to kill I, right? We certainly know that this is the exquisite pagoda and also know that it's the most precious treasure of the Buddhist sect. But we don't know how to use it and whether it's useful to our cultivation. Qin Mingwei looked at Evil Jin with bright eyes and said angrily, "Since it's a precious treasure, how could two people obtain it?" Evil Jin chuckled and waved the small flag. He said, "I told you so much. The flames of this greenleaf fire formation are about to burn out. Senior Marshal Brother Can, take care. I won't be seeing you off." As the small flag waved, the countless flames around Qin body grew larger, burning towards Qin. "Ha, Evil Jin, you know that I have the leaf fire physique. How could I be afraid of your green leaf fire formation?" As he spoke, Qin waved his hand and took out a disc-like object from his storage bag. He formed a seal with his hand and the crimson disc flew into the air and landed on top of Qin head. Soon after, a circle of cyan flames emerged from the edge of the disc and quickly protected Qin body. However, the situation was still beyond Qin expectations. When the orange and cyan flames collided, they didn't separate as he expected. Instead, the orange flames began to devour the cyan flames and the outermost flames turned cyan red. "Ah, Qian fire? Where did you get it? You clearly have a thunder physique." Qin was shocked and spat out a mouthful of true essence on the disc. More cyan flames flew out from the disc. These flames fell and the cyan red color was greatly reduced. "You don't need to know where I got the Qian fire. If I didn't have the Qian fire to restrain your leaf fire, how could I have dared to act rashly?" Jinxia laughed and waved the small flag. All of the heaven and earth Lingqi within 10 feet of the formation was sucked dry. The orange flame became even brighter, and like a wave of fire, it rushed towards the green leaf fire. "Go, within the circle of fire," Qin shouted. The flying sword in his hand turned into a ray of light and flew towards Evil Jin. With a pu, the formation's brilliance blocked the flying sword. The brilliance shook for a moment, then the flying sword flourished like a dazzling star and fiercely attacked the brilliance of the formation. Evil Jin frowned when he saw this. He clenched his teeth and bit the tip of his tongue. He spat a mouthful of blood on the small flag. Then, with a shake, the cyan brilliance mixed with the red light hit the formation. Suddenly, a huge suction force appeared around the formation and sucked in all the spirit energy within 100 feet of the formation. Although the flying sword was able to advance another foot or so, it was still blocked by the green-red light barrier. Evil Jin was relieved when he saw this. He sneered and said, "Senior Brother Can, I set up this formation because I was afraid that fighting with you would attract the attention of the other brothers. This green leaf fire formation is something I specially set up to deal with your leaf fire physique. Don't resist and don't take out any magic tools. Just obediently let the Qian fire burn you, ouch." At this point, Evil Jin's face greatly changed and became abnormally pale. Large beads of sweat rolled down his forehead. The hand that wasn't holding the flag clutched his heart as if someone was squeezing it. "Ha!" Within the green leaf fire formation, Qin laughter sounded. -7. Chapter 1554. The green-red dry fire gradually turned transparent, and Qin figure appeared from within. He held a pitch-black hook in his hand, and there was a dense grayish-black aura on the hook. The black aura was like a snake slithering around the hook. "How is it? How does the heart-devouring worm taste?" Qin asked gloomily. This is a heart-devouring worm? How did you plant this heart-devouring worm in my heart? How come I didn't notice it?" Evil Jin's face was pale and his head was covered in sweat. His eyes were red and he asked fiercely, "Look at your technique. It's not the usual technique of the 10,000 poison sect. How come it's similar to the legendary talismans? How could Qin care about him?" He waved the hook in his hand and the grayish-black gas faded a bit. At the same time, his face turned slightly gray. Ah! Evulsion screamed and fell to the ground. He barely managed to stabilize himself. At this time, Hemingway's face was red and the hook in his hand was trembling. The grayish-black gas was gradually absorbed into the hook. It seemed that he couldn't completely control the hook. Evulsion felt the pain in his heart lessen. He quickly sat down cross-legged and wanted to use his magic power. Hee, Evulsion, I didn't expect you to know about talismans. I'm afraid these years, you found a story in the technique teaching pavilion. Hemingway was a bit weak and his voice was hoarse. However, you have good eyesight. I used a talisman technique. If I were you, I wouldn't use my magic power. Otherwise, the heart-devouring worm would be even more powerful. Evulsion ignored him. However, when he tried to use his magic power, he felt a heart-wrenching pain again. His face changed, and he stopped. Then, Evil Tremor looked at Hemingway, who was inside the cyan fire, and sighed. Ever since I came back from the ruins of the Buddhist sect, I've only seen Senior Marshal Brother Ken once, 10 years ago. I've always been on my guard, so how could I have fallen into your trap? Senior Brother's heart-devouring worm. Ha ha ha! Hemingway laughed heartily and said in a hoarse voice. Junior Marshal Brother Jin, do you still remember the pill I gave you when you were injured by the guardian beast in the ruins of the Buddhist sect 30 years ago? Evulsion was puzzled. Remember? When I brought it over to take a look, it was to return it to Senior Brother. Suddenly Evulsion's eyes flashed fiercely as he gritted his teeth and said, Could it be that Senior Brother can place the heart corrosion worm on the elixir that day? Hee, what do you think? Hemingway smiled and said, Junior Apprentice Brother Jin is clearly injured, but you didn't take Elder Brother's medicinal pills. Doesn't that mean you still have the heart to let her go? I didn't harm anyone either. Unlike Senior Apprentice Brother Ken, who can actually cast a spell and make I fall for it without anyone noticing. Now that I's life is in Senior Apprentice Brother's hands, you call this guarding against people? Ha ha ha, Hemingway laughed coldly. Junior Brother Jin, this is the pot calling the kettle black. I may have cast a spell, but that was to protect myself. If not for Senior Apprentice Brother's trap, how could I have triggered the heart corrosion worm? Junior Marshal Brother Jin, haven't you thought about why Senior Apprentice Brother I didn't trigger the heart corrosion worm even after 30 years? Isn't it because you haven't found the origin of the exquisite tower yet? You don't dare to act recklessly. Evulsion's expression softened as he sneered. The green fire around Hemingway grew thinner and thinner as the orange fire swallowed up half of the green fire. Hemingway's expression was bitter as he said, If Junior Marshal Brother Jin reduces the power of the azurely fire array, I can answer your questions. Thinking for a moment, Evulsion took out a small flag and waved it, causing the orange fire to weaken a bit. I am listening. I don't know how many years this spell technique has been lost. When I was refining Qi, I accidentally obtained this soul tool and learned some spell techniques. Unfortunately, cultivating spells is different from my cultivation path. Cultivation focuses on communicating with heaven and earth and using the heaven and earth spiritual energy for one's own use. Spells, on the other hand, are related to the mysterious path of the soul. The soul is born in the body and tempering the soul. The foundation of cultivating spells is tempering the body. The body of a cultivator is extremely weak, so how can I cultivate spells? Senior Marshal Brother Ken, you can cultivate body cultivation, Evulsion replied. At this moment, the two of them were completely different from before. They didn't look like two mortal enemies. If it weren't for the fact that one of them was in the fire, and the other was sitting in the air with a strange expression on his face, anyone who saw them would have thought that they were two real martial brothers who were discussing Tao. Body cultivation? Those were merely some insignificant Taoists left behind after the decline of the Tao of talismans. I am already a late-stage foundation establishment cultivator, so there is no need for me to take the wrong path. Hemingway snorted. This heart-nibbling worm was originally a method of the 10,000 Poison sect. If you used a normal method, I would have been able to detect it. How did Senior Marshal Brother Can use the spell technique? Evil-Jin asked thoughtfully. Kan Mingwei replied. This is something that I have learned over the years, so I naturally can't reveal it. In fact, it is very simple. Since my body isn't strong enough to cultivate spells, I naturally have to use it in a flexible way. Using the spell technique to control the heart-nibbling worm, even a golden core cultivator wouldn't be able to detect it, right? Humph. Evil-Jin sneered. Unfortunately, although I can use the spell technique to control the heart-nibbling worm, the price to do so is far from what Junior Marshal Brother Jin can imagine. Therefore, although I have a backup plan, I haven't used it yet. Kan Mingwei sighed and looked at the flames around him. He then looked at Evil-Jin, who was outside the formation, and said, I have told you so much because I want to tell you that I am only doing this to protect myself. If Junior Marshal Brother Jin removes this formation, I will immediately remove the heart-nibbling worm. You and I will still be good brothers. We will both comprehend this exquisite tower together. And Evil-Jin slowly nodded. Senior Marshal Brother Kan's words are exactly what I was thinking. We have a great future and also have a Buddhist sex treasure. There is no need for us to waste our time here. Kan Mingwei was overjoyed and clapped his hands. Great minds think alike. How about we cast the spell together? All right. Evil Quake slowly stood up and picked up the small flag. Kan Mingwei also raised the small hook, and the grayish-black fog came out again. As soon as Evil-Jin raised the flag, Kan Mingwei asked, Senior Marshal Brother Kan, what is the price for using the heart-nibbling worm? Kan Mingwei was surprised. The hook in his hand paused for a moment. I'm afraid Junior Marshal Brother won't believe me. Senior Marshal Brother, it's up to me whether or not you believe me. Evil-Jin raised the flag again. 20 years of life. Kan Mingwei said and raised the hook in his hand. Evil-Jin's expression didn't change, but his eyes narrowed slightly. Nodding, he said, All right, Senior Marshal Brother Kansas. I will count to 3 and cast the spell at the same time. All right. 1, 2, 3. Evil-Jin didn't hesitate to count to 3. Once he finished counting to 3, the two of them would use their artifacts and soul armaments at the same time. Dozens of orange-red rays of light shot out from the small flag, but these rays of light didn't hit the area around the formation. Instead, they hit the orange-red flames around Kan Mingwei. At the same time, all of the black fog around Kan Mingwei's hook disappeared. Evil-Jin let out a heart-wrenching scream and spat out a mouthful of black blood. Inside the formation, the orange-red light shone everywhere. The fire was 10 times stronger than before and broke through Kan Mingwei's defenses. The orange-red flames quickly spread to Kan Mingwei's body. The two of them, both of them wanted to kill the other in an instant. Kan Mingwei was also shocked. He knew very well that this dry flame was the nemesis of his ignited fire physique. If the ignited fire true chi in his body was ignited by this dry flame, he would have no way to extinguish it. He would only end up being burned to death by this dry flame. Thinking about the blood oath he had made with Evil-Jin in the ruins of the Buddhist sect, Kan Mingwei's heart tightened. He desperately urged the little hook to kill Evil-Jin before the dry flame ignited his true chi. If Kan Mingwei was like this, how could Evil-Jin not be like this? When Evil-Jin heard that Kan Mingwei would lose 20 years of his lifespan to activate the soul-devouring worm, he didn't know if that was true or not. Since Kan Mingwei had paid such a huge price to activate the soul-devouring worm, how could he give up so easily? Activating the soul-devouring worm was already a huge price, but what about getting rid of it? Wouldn't the price be even higher? Moreover, talismans were very mysterious. Without a powerful spell, it was impossible to detect them. This was one of the reasons why the talismans were destroyed. Evil-Jin wouldn't let such a dangerous enemy escape from the formation he had set up. As a result, Evil-Jin was even more determined to kill Kan Mingwei. He had already used up all of his energy to activate the flag. He wanted to kill Kan Mingwei before the soul-devouring worm was fully activated. Whoosh! Evil-Jin's body fell rapidly. He was in so much pain that he couldn't stand still in the air. The talisman's method was really strange. When Evil-Jin was talking to Qin Mingwei, he had already tried several secret techniques of the Imperial Thunder Sect, but none of them worked. Through the control of the formation, Evil-Jin knew that the fire was about to reach Qin Mingwei. He also knew that all of Qin Mingwei's magic tools and other items were refined with leaf fire. If he used them, they would undoubtedly be combustible. Qin Mingwei wouldn't rashly use them. Evil-Jin endured the incomparable pain in his heart and waved his hand. He struck himself with a spell seal and spat out a mouthful of blood onto the small flag. He quickly waved his hand and a gorgeous orange light shot out from the small flag. As the light shot out, the small flag lost its color. Evil-Jin's heart was in severe pain and his vision turned black. His entire body fell from the air. A late-stage Foundation establishment cultivator was easily killed by a strange talisman without any room to resist. Presumably, Evil-Jin wouldn't be able to rest in peace. He had so many tricks up his sleeve that he didn't even have the chance to use before he became the soul-devouring worm's food. Evil Tremor's final attack before his death was also frightening. When the light landed on the orange flames, the flames doubled in size. Qin Mingwei was surrounded by an orange sea of flames. Seeing that he couldn't dodge, Qin Mingwei clenched his teeth and took out a shiny talisman from his storage pouch. He activated his Fa-Li and placed it on his body. With a buzzing sound, an extremely bright light flashed from Qin Mingwei's body. Within the light, Qin Mingwei's upper body gradually changed. His face, neck, and arms were covered in layers of fine lines. Moreover, his slightly pale golden skin turned green. After the light faded, a monster that looked somewhat similar to a giant she-beast appeared in the air. Its body was actually several feet taller than before. Roar! At this moment, Qin Mingwei's roar was different. It was like a horse's roar. His huge body charged through the flames and flew towards the formation's light barrier. However, just as Qin Mingwei's huge body passed through the sea of fire, the dry fire ignited his entire body. However, his green skin was thick and coarse, and it actually had the effect of blocking the dry fire. For a moment, it was unable to burn into his meridians. Rumble! Qin Mingwei flew in front of the formation. He raised his large fist and smashed it at the light barrier. Deafening sounds continuously came from the light barrier. The light barrier violently shook and showed signs of loosening. Qin Mingwei's divine sense sensed something and was overjoyed. His two fists rained down like raindrops. As the light barrier shook, the light gradually weakened. Without anyone controlling it, the formation truly began to collapse. However, as the light from the formation weakened, the green light on Qin Mingwei's body also weakened. The patterns on his exposed skin also gradually disappeared. True fear appeared in Qin Mingwei's eyes. As he struck the formation with one fist, his other hand continuously formed seals in an attempt to extinguish the flames. However, Qin Mingwei didn't dare to use any fire-type spells. As for water-type defensive spells, only powerful ones had some effect. However, these effects were like a cup of water in the seemingly endless sea of flames. Roar! Qin Mingwei raised his head and roared. He didn't think of anything else and continued to strike the formation with his two fists. Kacha! A crisp sound rang out, and a slight crack appeared on the light barrier of the formation. Qin Mingwei was overjoyed. Just as he was about to strike the crack with his fist again, the green light on his body suddenly faded. At the same time, a dim talisman floated down from his body. No! Qin Mingwei panicked. He reached out his hand to grab the talisman, but at that moment, he saw a wisp of fiery light sweep across his body. His gradually shrinking body immediately began to burn like dry firewood. Qin Mingwei could sense that the quintessential qi in his meridians had been ignited as well. The fire began to burn from the inside out. Although he knew that Evil Tremor was no longer alive outside the formation, he still sighed. He slapped his hand and took out a small hook from his storage bag. Before he died, he waved it one last time. -7. Chapter 1555. two late-stage Foundation establishment cultivators were both wounded in front of Xiaohua. One was strangely killed by the mind-corroding worm, and the other was burned to death by the dry fire. Xiaohua was originally lying on the ground of the spell formation, playing dead. However, as the two continued to act more and more brilliantly, Xiaohua couldn't help but open his eyes and perk up his ears to watch the show. At this time, the sky was already dusk. The setting sun shone in the west with its blood-like splendor. The dusk and the shadows of the surrounding mountains covered the spell formation. Not far from Xiaohua, the flame was still emitting its last blazing heat in the air. Alas, where there are people, there will be fighting! Master's wife is absolutely right. Xiaohua was deeply moved. Although these two late-stage Foundation establishment cultivators didn't release their pressure, either of them looked at Xiaohua. However, their fighting methods, the power of the talismans, the effects of the talismans, and the terror of the dry fire all made Xiaohua shudder. Xiaohua deeply knew that even if he didn't use this spell formation, he wouldn't be able to last 10 moves against these two. 30 years, these two really could endure silently. For that so-called Buddhist treasure, in the end, the two still lost their lives. The talisman technique, which is the sinister technique of Jinghua City's Zhu clan, is really powerful. Late-stage Foundation establishment cultivators don't even have the strength to fight back. However, the price of using the talisman technique is too high. 20 years of life. Alas, no matter how powerful the talisman technique is, it's not as powerful as this Qin Mingwei's scheming. He made the first move 30 years ago. In comparison, this evil tremor is much worse. What was the crystal chip that Qin Mingwei used before he died? It looks similar to the Yunqing talisman that Li Zongbao used at that time. Could it be a talisman? Yes, it should be. I'm afraid it's some spirit beast's fur and blood that caused the body to mutate and produce great strength. Humph, this kind of strength is 10 times more powerful than the Vajra talisman, but it's much weaker than this young master's strength. Hee, the lifespan talisman technique, what Buddhist treasure, still depends on luck. Even late-stage Foundation establishment cultivators don't have the fortune to enjoy it, right? The death of a late-stage Foundation establishment cultivator greatly stimulated Xiaohua. Xiaohua couldn't help but think a lot. As the last ray of light from the setting sun disappeared from the earth, Xiaohua suddenly woke up. Damn it, what was I thinking? The two old things are dead, but I'm still trapped by the formation. Looking at the situation, if I can't escape by myself, I can only wait to be discovered. Let's not talk about whether they'll kill me to silence me if they think about the benefits. Even if it's the talisman's spell or the Buddhist sex treasures, I won't have a share in them. Making a prompt decision, Xiaohua sent his consciousness into the space and called Goldie out. Mother! When Little Yellow heard Xiaohua's words, he was very puzzled. Needless to say, he didn't understand anything about restrictions or formations. He could only look at Xiaohua blankly. Little Huang, look, Mother can't even move. Her body is tied up by something. Come and help Mother untie it. Xiaohua thought for a long time and could only say this. Xiaohua originally wanted to say something else, but something that made him flabbergasted happened. He saw Little Yellow first look around with his eyes in confusion, then reluctantly fly to Xiaohua's body and spin around for a while before landing in front of Xiaohua. Then, he threw himself on the ground and closed his eyes, looking very tired. Poor child! Xiaohua couldn't bear it. Just as he was about to let Little Yellow go back, the tightly shut third eye on Little Yellow's forehead gradually opened. That silvery white eye emitted an extremely faint silver brilliance. Following that, a motionless eye circling around Xiaohua's body, Little Yellow's third eye slowly closed. Then, Little Yellow didn't open his eyes, but said very weakly, Mother, I don't have any strength left. Can you call Little Silver out? Little Silver? Xiaohua stared blankly, then immediately understood. His mind was everywhere, and the spirit-seeking mouse, which didn't listen to Xiaohua at all, had been brought out with great difficulty by Xiaohua. Little Silver had been running around anxiously when he couldn't find Little Yellow in the space, but he had listened to Little Yellow's instructions and didn't run out of the 10 zhang radius. When he saw Little Yellow, he immediately flew onto Little Yellow's back and used his little tail to wrap around the fur on Little Yellow's back. Unfortunately, Little Yellow's fur wasn't long, and Little Silver couldn't wrap around it after trying a few times. Little Yellow pointed at Xiaohua's body with its mouth. Xiaohua should have understood, and the little mouse head shook its head repeatedly. It was very disdainful of Xiaohua, but in the end, it still reluctantly flew to Xiaohua's back, opened its little mouth, and started gnawing at the empty space on his back. Zzz. That faintly discernible sound kept coming. Xiaohua got goosebumps all over when he heard it. At that moment, Xiaohua had already sobered up from the strangeness of seeing Little Yellow's third eye. It was when the silver eye had appeared that the 4 words, "Delusion Breaker Magic Eye," had flashed through his mind. If the one on Little Yellow's forehead is a Delusion Breaker Magic Eye, then isn't the one on my left hand also a Delusion Breaker Magic Eye? But why can Little Yellow's open, but mine can't? Xiaohua came to his senses, and this was his first thought. Furthermore, this Delusion Breaker Magic Eye can actually see the weakness of a restriction. Is this Little Silver gnawing on that restriction? My goodness, this spirit-seeking mouse is really different. It can actually use its teeth to gnaw on a restriction. He didn't know if it was because the restriction at the late Foundation establishment stage was abnormally tough, or if it was because Little Silver was still small and didn't have enough strength. But it wasn't until the full moon rose in the sky that Xiaohua suddenly felt the pressure on his back loosen, and then his whole body was shackled with a lot less force. Good! Xiaohua was overjoyed. He took a deep breath and clenched his fists as hard as he could. Then, with a loud shout, "Open!" he pushed his arms outwards at the same time. Xiaohua was extremely strong at that moment. Although Evil Tremor's magic power was strong, Little Silver had already broken the great confinement spell. Wherever Xiaohua's strength passed, the entire restriction immediately collapsed, and with a flash of brilliance, it was completely annihilated. Little Silver, who had been on Xiaohua's back, was startled when it was suddenly bounced up. Before it could come back to its senses and fly onto Little Yellow's back, a big hand caught it. Little Silver was initially repulsed, but there was an aura in the big hand that made him feel peaceful. Little Silver couldn't help landing on the big hand, and very habitually its little tail curled around Xiaohua's right little finger. It was exactly the same as when Little Silver was born. Little Silver's little head wasn't big enough. It raised its head and squeaked as it looked at the colossal Xiaohua, a trace of blood seeping out of Little Silver's teeth. "Ai, good Little Silver!" Xiaohua had seen it earlier, and very tenderly reached out to stroke Little Silver's head. Little Silver closed its eyes slightly, looking like it was enjoying itself. After a while, Xiaohua put the exhausted Little Yellow and Little Silver into the space. Little Silver seemed to be reluctant to part with Xiaohua's hand as its little tail actually wrapped around it. It was only after Little Yellow scolded it that it reluctantly let go. But when Xiaohua was about to put Little Yellow into the space, he ran into another problem. "Mother, there seems to be a very nice smell here, and it seems edible. I don't want to go back now," Little Yellow said tiredly as it refused to go back into the space. "Eh?" Xiaohua was very surprised. He had never known what Little Yellow ate, so when he heard it now, he naturally wouldn't let it go back so easily. Thus, Little Yellow lay on Xiaohua's shoulder and flew up into the air. The array which had been cracked by Qin Mingwei at dusk had already started to gradually recover, and the crack was almost gone. Xiaohua reached out and took the tip of the magic spear in his hand. He then exerted all his strength and swiftly stabbed the same spot on the crack a dozen times. With a hua sound, like glass shattering, a brilliant light flashed in the area of several dozen zhang around them. 6 sparkling discs appeared in the air, and then they all fell to the ground. Xiaohua waved his hand, and the 6 discs fell into his hand one by one. Looking at the runes on the discs, and then looking at the unknown texture of the discs, Xiaohua gave up the idea of exploring it, and put all the discs into the space. Then, Xiaohua quickly walked over to Evil Quake's corpse and picked up the small flag that had fallen to the side. The small flag was heavy in his hand, and the flagpole was made of a pitch-black material. The flag was engraved with many flame-like runes, and with a slight wave, the runes seemed to be able to float. With the small flag and the discs, Xiaohua naturally wanted to find the method to set up the array. But looking at Evil Quake's corpse, Xiaohua hesitated. If he only took the method to set up the array, he naturally wouldn't be willing. Xiaohua definitely wouldn't let go of the things in Evil Quake's storage bag, but if he took everything, he couldn't leave the corpse behind. But if he didn't leave Evil Quake's corpse behind, then Evil Quake would mysteriously disappear. Maybe it would cause some commotion in the Imperial Thunder sect, and he wouldn't be able to get anything, and would even be caught. Grandma, who's afraid of who? This young master is only a chi condensation disciple. You can suspect anyone, but this young master. Xiaohua naturally wouldn't let go of anything useful. He reached out and took off Evil Quake's storage bag, and without looking at the things inside carefully, he threw them all into the space. Then, he threw the empty storage bag on the ground, and with a wave of his right hand, a wisp of purple flame appeared in his hand. That flame looked incomparably pure, and also extremely poignant. It was the Samadhi true fire that Xiaohua had been practicing for more than 2 years. Xiaohua flicked his hand, and a purple spark flew out from the flame, slowly falling on Evil Quake's corpse. With a ting sound, Evil Quake's corpse suddenly burst into flames, just like Kinmingwei's body that was ignited. After a moment, seeing that Evil Quake's corpse and the storage bag had turned into ashes, Xiaohua held the Samadhi true fire in his hand and turned to look at the place where Kinmingwei fell. Kinmingwei was injured by the Samadhi true fire, so there wasn't any corpse on the ground. There was only a small pitch-black hook in the ashes, and a small pagoda that was about 3 feet long and 1 foot wide. And this small pagoda should be the exquisite heaven evolution pagoda that they were talking about. Xiaohua extinguished the Samadhi true fire in his hand, then reached out and picked up the exquisite heaven evolution pagoda from the ground. After looking at it roughly, he put it into the space. At the bottom of the exquisite pagoda, another small section of white bone was revealed. -7. Chapter 1556. Why is there a white bone here? Xiaohua's gaze fell on the ground where the exquisite pagoda was just now. A white bone was strangely placed there. It's Kinmingwei's remains? Xiaohua was puzzled. If it's Kinmingwei's remains, it's impossible for there to be only a section left. Moreover, it looks very neat. Humph, who cares what it is? Thinking about what kind of talisman Kinmingwei used, Xiaohua's heart trembled. The true Samadhi fire in his hand was still going to burn this white bone. However, what made Xiaohua even more shocked was that the white bone didn't turn into ashes like he imagined under the pure purple flames of the true Samadhi fire. Instead, it became even more lustrous. Only, this lustrous luster was faint green. Under the moonlight, it was somewhat frightening. Strange! Xiaohua was greatly surprised. He urged the magic power in his body and added 2 more wisps of true Samadhi fire. The fire burned even brighter, and the green light of the white bone became even brighter. After another moment, the green light on the white bone flashed. From the green light, crooked characters that were somewhat similar to tadpoles, but were also extremely different appeared. After these characters appeared, they flowed above the white bone like water, and the white bone returned to its original white appearance. It turned out that this faint green luster was emitted by these characters themselves. Green seal script! Xiaohua saw these characters and immediately cried out in surprise. Admittedly, he had never seen these characters before. However, he had seen them in the booklet given to him by the Jingbua City's Zhu family. These green seal scripts were precisely the characters that recorded the orthodox talisman techniques. They were different from the characters commonly used in the Xiaoyu continent's cultivation world. According to the booklet, these green seal scripts were characters that had been passed down from the primordial era until now. Each character had a mystical talisman power. The talisman techniques left behind from the primordial era could only be recorded in these characters. Moreover, they could only be used in these characters. Good heavens, when this young master saw it, I only took it as a pastime and even scoffed at it. Now that I've seen it with my own eyes, I dare to truly believe it. Xiaohua opened his eyes wide and thought to himself. This green seal script is already so mystical. Then, those two unknown characters used by the primordial celestials, what are they like? What kind of earth-shattering magic power is there? While thinking, Xiaohua reached out his hand and picked up the white bone. Following the instructions in the book, he released his perception and carefully touched the green seal on the white bone. Speaking of which, it was quite mysterious. The green seal followed Xiaohua's perception and flowed towards his Naiwen palace. However, Xiaohua's mind did not gain anything from the green seal even after it rotated around Xiaohua's Naiwen palace for a moment. He was unable to read anything. Could it be that the records in the book are wrong? Xiaohua frowned. But at this moment, the reverse light in the space behind Xiaohua's head flickered. The green seal suddenly changed direction and entered the space. Moreover, it started to revolve around the reverse light. In an instant, symbols, words, and runes appeared in Xiaohua's mind. Moreover, as the images of those talismans and incantations were left in Xiaohua's mind, the green seal gradually dimmed until it completely disappeared. This is different from what was recorded in the book. Xiaohua felt the disappearance of the green seal and looked at the white bone in his hand. He was somewhat at a loss. He wanted to find an answer from the green seal in his mind. Unfortunately, he recognized the green seal, but the green seal did not recognize him. Xiaohua could not understand a single word. Damn it! Xiaohua waved the white bone in his hand. After thinking for a moment, he also stored it in the space. However, what he did not notice was that as soon as the white bone entered the space, extremely small lightning flashed in the space and attacked the white bone from all directions. Ken Mingwei's storage pouch was burned by the fire. All the spirit pills, spirit stones, and other things inside were gone. Only the exquisite derivation pagoda and the white bone that recorded the talismans and incantations were left. After taking these things, Xiaohua's gaze naturally fell on the small hook on the ground. After seeing the use of this small hook, Xiaohua envied the strangeness of this thing. Thinking about it with his feet, a late-stage foundation establishment cultivator was killed by this thing without anyone noticing. As a qi condensation cultivator, how could Xiaohua not be moved? However, the reason why Xiaohua took this thing in the end was because he had some misgivings about this so-called soul tool. He had a bad feeling in his heart. Sweeping his perception around the soul tool, he did not find anything abnormal. That grayish-black fog also did not reappear. Xiaohua waved his hand and the small hook immediately flew up and landed in Xiaohua's hand. The hook was light as a feather, almost weightless. However, in Xiaohua's hand, a cold feeling came from his hand and also from his heart. Strange! Xiaohua had encountered too many strange things tonight. He could not help but say that it was strange a few times. Holding the small hook in front of his eyes, he turned it left and right. The pitch-black small hook also absorbed the brilliance of the full moon, and did not emit any light. Xiaohuang, who was lying on Xiaohua's shoulder, suddenly opened his eyes and let out a shriek. What's wrong? Seeing Xiaohuang's shriek, Xiaohua very naturally asked. But at this moment, a palm-sized shadow flew out from the small hook and pounced at Xiaohua's face with extreme speed. Xiaohua was greatly alarmed and instinctively tilted his head back. However, that shadow was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, it had already pounced on Xiaohua's face. Xiaohua only felt his vision darken. That palm-sized shadow actually penetrated Xiaohua's head and pounced on the location of his Naiwen palace. Your Naiwen palace? Grandma! Why don't you have a Naiwen palace? Xiaohua actually heard Ken Mingwei's voice strangely. He did not know whether it was in his ears or in his heart. Ken Mingwei! You! Xiao Hua suddenly thought of the use of Kenmingwei's soul tool at the last moment. This guy actually hid his primordial spirit in the soul tool and wanted to possess his Naiwen palace. But my Naiwen palace? Why don't I have a Naiwen palace? Xiao Hua's heart was greatly alarmed. At this moment, Xiao Huang, who had been lying on Xiao Hua's shoulder all this time, suddenly flashed with joy. With a swing of its large tail, it suddenly flew up to face Xiao Hua's face. Kenmingwei's primordial spirit did not discover Xiao Hua's Naiwen palace, and could only withdraw from Xiao Hua's mind. But at this moment, Xiao Hua, who was facing Xiao Hua, humphed. A white brilliance shot out from Xiao Hua's nose and covered Xiao Hua's face. An incomparably powerful suction force was born from that white light and firmly grabbed onto Kenmingwei's primordial spirit. At this moment, a sound of panic came from the bottom of Xiao Hua's heart. Without waiting for Kenmingwei's primordial spirit to say another word, the white brilliance from Xiao Hua's nose contracted and Kenmingwei's primordial spirit was sucked into Xiao Hua's body. This? Xiao Hua was stupefied. He never thought that Xiao Huang's food would actually be the primordial spirit of a cultivator. This was the primordial spirit of a late-stage foundation establishment cultivator. A primordial spirit that had been tempered for hundreds of years and was incomparably sturdy. It was actually so easily eaten by Xiao Huang. This scene was even more shocking than when Xiao Hua saw Kenmingwei's primordial spirit fly out of the soul armament. And it was even more shocking than everything he had seen and heard today. Burp! Xiao Huang seemed to burp. A voice rang out. Mother, this thing is really fragrant. No wonder I smelled it just now, it was actually this thing. Mother, I'm tired. I feel warm, like I'm about to grow up. As Xiao Huang said this, its eyes actually slowly closed. Oh, Xiao Hua replied. With a move of his hand, he also took Xiao Huang into the space. Sure enough, Xiao Huang laid down on the ground and immediately fell asleep. Having encountered a life and death situation, Xiao Hua was no longer in the mood to look at the uniqueness of the soul armament. With a shake of his hand, he put it into the space and then looked around Tenjiang around him. Seeing that there were no longer any obstructions, he flew up and headed in the direction Kenmingwei came from during the day. Fortunately, Xiao Hua's direction wasn't wrong. During this time, he encountered a middle-stage foundation establishment cultivator. Because he had just seen a sneak attack, Xiao Hua was exceptionally careful. But when that cultivator saw that Xiao Hua was a new disciple of Thunderclap Palace and that he had lost his way, he actually enthusiastically brought Xiao Hua to the vicinity of Thunderclap Palace. Although this cultivator was also going in the same direction, it was enough to make Xiao Hua sigh in his heart. Actually, it's not that some cultivators don't have a conscience and don't have refined and courteous etiquette. It's just that these cultured and refined appearances and the conscience hidden in the depths of their hearts are unable to withstand the test of benefits. As long as there is a conflict of interest, these so-called etiquette and conscience will likely be discarded. And if this cultivator knew that I had a Buddhist treasure on me, I fear he would have already killed me. He wouldn't be so amiable as to bring me back to Thunderclap Palace, right? So, the way to avoid a conflict of interest is to firmly guard your own secret and absolutely not let anyone know. Even if it's your own master or your own senior martial brother, you shouldn't use these great temptations to test each other's kinship. If you can really withstand the tests, then it's fine. But if you can't, then the relationship between master and disciple, the relationship between senior and junior martial brothers, will all turn into smoke. If master and eldest senior martial brother are like this, then what about the other disciples of Thunderclap Palace and Thunderclap Sect? What about the direct disciples of Thunderclap Sect and the disciples of cultivator families? Wouldn't they be even more unreliable? Not to mention the temptation, even a little high profile would make them jealous. It's better for me to keep a low profile. Now that I have a cultivation technique, medicinal pills, and many other things, I lack time to cultivate all day long. Who has the patience to play this game with them? As Xiao Hua thought this, he made up his mind and was about to step into Thunderclap Palace when a cold voice sounded. Xiaohua, you weren't in Thunderclap Palace last night? Xiaohua was stunned. When he turned his head to look, he saw that it was Zhen Liang, who he had seen in the Jade Archive Hall yesterday. This is bad. I just beat this guy up yesterday. How did he see me today? This is karma. Xiaohua somewhat helplessly stopped his steps. -7. Chapter 1557. Xiaohua was a bit hesitant to answer Zhen Liang's question. Xiaohua didn't know how he should answer Zhen Liang's question. He only heard from Xiangyang that he was a qi refining disciple and had to return to Zhenlei Palace every day, but he didn't know what kind of punishment awaited him. Thinking for a moment, Xiaohua cupped his hands and said, Senior Brother Zhen, I followed Senior Brother Xiangyang to Thunder Palace yesterday to get an errand. When I came back, I was lost and didn't dare to fly around at night. I waited until dawn to leave. And I met a Foundation establishment marshal uncle outside earlier, and it was he who sent me back. According to Xiaohua's thoughts, Zhen Liang would definitely use this mistake of his to teach him a lesson. Xiaohua didn't have any reason to make up an excuse, so he could only tell the truth. Who would have thought that Zhen Liang's face would reveal a strange expression? He looked at Xiaohua from head to toe, snorted from his nose, and said, It's no wonder. The other disciples came to the Jade Archive Hall on the first day to register and receive their identity token, but you came late on the second day. Moreover, you came in such an aggressive manner that you didn't give any face to the other disciples who were guarding the hall. Then, you hurriedly went to the Thunder Palace to show off your power. How could you think of receiving your identity token? Since that token is the proof of our thunder-controlling sex disciples, it also has the map of our 8 great thunder palaces and other dangerous palaces. If you didn't take the token, how could you not get lost in Liamo Mountain? Hearing Zhen Liang's words, Xiaohua's face turned green and red. He really didn't know, and the cowardly Xiangyang probably forgot about this matter because he saw Xiaohua teaching a lesson to a disciple of Jade Archive Hall. Humph! Zhen Liang patted his hand and took out a token and a thin booklet from his storage pouch. He sneered and said, I called a disciple to find you at your residence last night, but you weren't there. I had no choice but to send you off personally today. Then, he waved his hand and the token and booklet flew to Xiaohua. Xiaohua reached out to receive them and bowed. Thank you, Senior Brother General yesterday. Forget it. It's already over, don't mention it. Zhen Liang waved his hand and turned to leave. As he walked, he said, The token needs to be recognized by blood. The booklet records the key to using the token. Take a good look. Yes, disciple understands. Xiaohua didn't think that he would pass this test so easily. His face was full of smiles as he respectfully sent Zhen Liang off. After returning to the fledgling Thunder Peak, Xiaohua sat down cross-legged in his cabin number 1334. He originally wanted to take inventory of the things he obtained from the evil shaker, but in addition to spirit stones, spirit grasses, and dawn, there were only a few magic tools and a few jade slips that seemed to have some origin. Xiaohua knew that these things could not be used by him in the qi refining stage, and he absolutely could not use them. Therefore, after thinking about it for a while, he gave up. Xiaohua first took out the token and the booklet. The booklet was very thin, and Xiaohua finished reading it in the time it took to eat a meal. After which, he closed his eyes and pondered for a moment. Then, he stretched out his finger, and a drop of blood was forced out from his finger and dripped onto the token. Just like the situation yesterday in the Jade Archive Hall, the blood did not seep into the token. Only under the control of Xiaohua's perception did it gradually seep into the token. As it seeped in, the entire token emitted a faint golden color, and then disappeared, returning to its original appearance. Damn it, the blood on this young master's body seems to have a problem. Xiaohua sighed. In the future, I can't casually reveal it. Then, Xiaohua made a hand seal and urged his magic power to hit the token. A bright light flashed, and a rather large topographic map emerged from the token. On the map, there were 8 shining spots, which were very eye-catching. These 8 spots are the 8 great thunder palaces, right? Then where am I? Looking carefully, sure enough, in one of the light spots, there was a small golden spot flashing. Oh? This is the Zhenlei Palace? While thinking, Xiaohua pointed his finger, and the dot of light gradually enlarged. 3 small words appeared, Zhenlei Palace. Looking around the 8 great thunder palaces, some places were dark, some places were gray, and there were even a few places that were red. According to the booklet, the red ones should be the forbidden areas of the Imperial Thunder Sect, the gray ones should be the places where there were few people, and the dark ones should be the places where the spiritual chi of heaven and earth was scarce. Haha, sure enough, there is a sect. Different from rogue cultivators, these things don't need a single spiritual stone to get. This young master is not afraid of getting lost in the future. Then, Xiaohua changed his hand seal again, and the token in his hand trembled slightly. Then Xiaohua stretched out his hand on the token, and a token that was exactly the same as the one in Xiaohua's hand was caught in his hand. Ha ha, fun! Xiaohua put the token in his hand into another token, and that token actually disappeared into the other token. Then, Xiaohua used his hand to catch more tokens, and one after another, exactly the same token appeared out of thin air. Hee hee, little junior brother, what are you doing? Just as Xiaohua was having fun, Xian Yang's voice came from outside the wooden house. Xiaohua threw a few tokens on the table in the wooden house, and bowed to Xian Yang, who entered the door, and said, "Greetings, big senior brother." "I heard you laughing before I entered the door," Xian Yang said with a smile. "Little brother just received a token, and I'm practicing with it." Xiaohua pointed at the pile of tokens on the table and laughed. "I'll, look at me." Xian Yang patted his forehead with his hand and said, "I actually forgot to receive your identity token in the Jade Archive Hall yesterday. If you have forgotten, then forget it." Xiaohua took back the token and said with a smile, "The disciple who was beaten in the Jade Archive Hall this morning sent it to me." "And? They sent it?" Xian Yang was slightly surprised, and then nodded slightly. "AI, it seems that it's good to have some background." "What background can I have? I just got a so-called sect master's token." Xiaohua was disdainful. "Oh, my little junior brother, a so-called sect master's token is really easy for you to say. How many cultivators in my Imperial Thunder sect, no matter how profound their cultivation is, how many of them have a sect master's token? Besides, the number of Qi condensation disciples and foundation establishment disciples who have a sect master's token can be counted on one hand, right?" Xian Yang said with a face full of admiration. "Hee hee, let's not talk about this," Xiaohua said with a smile. "Big senior brother, what urgent matter did you have yesterday? Is it done?" "Oh, it's nothing." Xian Yang clapped his hands and took out a booklet and a token. He said with a smile, "This booklet contains the cultivation method for the first level of lightning evasion. Your senior sister-in-law copied it for you last night." "Hee hee, thank you, big senior brother, thank you, senior sister-in-law." Xiaohua was happy in his heart. He first took the booklet, then looked at the other token strangely. "Oh, this token was found by Master last night when he went to the Thunderclap Palace to ask the Palace Master to help you find it." Xian Yang smiled and handed the token to Xiaohua. "Help me find it." Xiaohua took it blankly and looked left and right, not knowing what to do. "Let's go, you just need to follow me to the Spring Thunder Hall." Xian Yang rarely kept him in suspense and left the wooden house first. In the Spring Thunder Hall, the disciple on duty was Zhen Zhen from before. Xiaohua naturally knew. Zhen Zhen didn't joke with Xian Yang and only looked at Xiaohua and asked curiously, "Xiaohua, could it be that your helpless master dislikes you for being a loose cultivator and doesn't want you anymore?" Xiaohua curled his lips in his heart and didn't dare to say anything. Xian Yang cupped his hands and said, "Xiaohua's aptitude is exceptional and is a rare disciple of the Thunderclap Palace. How could my master not want you? I came here on the orders of the deacon of the Thunderclap Palace's Qiqiao Pavilion. Xiaohua is guarding the Eastern Ridge Herb Garden, which is really too far from the Thunderclap Palace. Going back and forth every day is really tiring, so Xiaohua can choose a place to cultivate in the Eastern Ridge Herb Garden. He doesn't need to report to the Thunderclap Palace every day. Oh, so it's like that. Zhen Jian didn't have any special reaction. With a wave of his hand, the token in Xiaohua's hand flew into his hand. He scanned it with his divine sense and nodded. And I understand. In a while, I will bring this token to report. It seems that not having to report to the Thunderclap Palace every day isn't rare. Xiaohua suddenly understood, but immediately after, Xiaohua's heart was moved. Indeed, from the deafening Thunder Palace to the 10,000 Thunder Valley, then from the 10,000 Thunder Valley to the deafening Thunder Palace, and then to the Gen Thunder Palace early this morning. Xiaohua already knew the distance, especially when he had to ask for the palace lord's permission at night. Most likely, his master had no choice but to go to the deafening Thunder Palace personally. Xiangyang had been busy since yesterday until today. He had been working hard for this little junior brother of his whom he had just met. He was helpless. Sigh, Xiaohua sighed. In this world, other than mutual deception and life and death struggles, there was also touching warmth and care. Let's go, little junior brother. I will bring you to the Eastern Ridge Herb Garden. Xiangyang cupped his hands and said to Xiaohua. There's no need, right? Eldest senior brother, I have the token with me. There is also a map on it. I can go there alone, Xiaohua said. Don't. Let me bring you there first, Xiangyang said with a smile. The Eastern Ridge Herb Garden is very far. There are many forbidden and dangerous areas. If little junior brother accidentally enters, not to mention master, even your senior sister-in-law will question me. Then I will have to trouble you, eldest senior brother. Xiaohua's heart felt warm. The Eastern Ridge Herb Garden was indeed very far. Xianyang's thunder escape technique was also not successful. Although he was already in the early stage of the foundation establishment realm, his flying speed was still not as fast as Xiaohua's. Therefore, when they arrived at the Eastern Ridge Herb Garden, it was already close to noon. Of course, along the way, Xianyang pointed out the locations of several forbidden and dangerous areas. Xiaohua held the token and looked at it while secretly memorizing it in his heart. The place where he met with danger last night was a grayish-black area on the topographic map. It was called the Evil Stream Plain. It should be a place where the heaven and earth linked qi was insufficient, and where there were few people. Xiaohua wanted to ask about the situation there, but when the words reached his mouth, he stopped. He planned to bury the matter of last night in his heart for the rest of his life. Look, the Eastern Ridge is not far ahead, Xiangyang pointed. In the distance, a continuous mountain range rose and fell. The mountain range was light yellow and looked very dazzling under the sunlight. -7. Chapter 1558. Light yellow? Xiaohua looked from afar and was slightly startled. He asked in a low voice, Is it because of the Eastern Ridge's earth fire? Xiangyang nodded. Exactly. It is said that this place used to have abundant heaven and earth spiritual energy. My Thunder Palace's Qiao Pavilion set up a medicine garden here to plant spiritual herbs. However, thousands of years ago, there was a huge change in Dawn Rain continent. Earth fire suddenly appeared in Eastern Ridge, and the heaven and earth spiritual energy here became scarce. Moreover, the fire attribute spiritual energy took up the majority, making it unsuitable for spiritual herbs to grow. Later, Qiao Pavilion set up a pill room here, wanting to borrow the power of the earth fire to refine pills. However, the earth fire was fine at first, but later on, it became scarce. Moreover, this place was extremely far from Thunder Palace, so the pill room was abandoned over time. The two gradually flew closer as they talked. Xiangyang pointed at the yellow spiritual herbs on Eastern Ridge's light yellow mountain range and said with a smile, Although the pill room was abandoned, the spiritual herbs grew freely. No one cared about them. After all, the spiritual herbs that we consume have to be aged. If you don't care about them, they will grow by themselves. My Thunder Palace's disciples only need to come here at fixed times to take a look and pick suitable spiritual herbs. Those yellow spiritual herbs seem to be Shaoyan grass? Xiaohua looked at the spiritual herbs on the mountain range and asked with some hesitation. These spiritual herbs are very rare outside. I have been to EG before, but I have never seen them. I have only seen them in books. I didn't expect Junior Brother to also know about spiritual herbs. Xiangyang clapped and said with a smile, This is precisely Shaoyan grass. I don't know when it was, or which disciple saw that Shaoyan grass, which was rarely seen in other places, grew extremely well here, so he advised the palace's deacon to plant Shaoyan grass everywhere. I didn't expect to hit the jackpot. Ever since Shaoyan grass was planted in Eastern Ridge, my Thunder Palace's bright flower pill no longer lacks spiritual herbs. Bright flower pill's main ingredient is Shaoyan grass? Xiaohua asked curiously. Since Shaoyan grass is so precious, why is there no one guarding here? Junior Brother doesn't know. The Shaoyan grass from before is indeed precious, but the Shaoyan grass planted here probably won't be used up in a few hundred years. Do you think Shaoyan grass is still precious in my Thunder Palace? Besides, this place was really far from the Thunderclap Palace. Which Qi condensation disciple would be willing to come here? Moreover, with the formation set up by our Thunderclap Palace's formation experts, is there still a need to keep watch? Xiangyang stopped and smiled. Little Junior Brother, what about the Eastern Ridge's token? If you don't use the token, I'm afraid that only martial uncles of the Oris Core stage would be able to break in. Xiaohua nodded as he listened. He clapped his hand and took out the token. He already knew how to use this token. He formed a seal and his magic power surged out. A wave-like brilliance rushed out from the token. As the brilliance flashed in the air, the brilliance expanded. When it was about 100 feet in front of Xiaohua, it suddenly scattered into specks of light and landed in the air. Sizzle! The light spots were like water droplets falling into a pot of oil. The space where each light spot was located trembled slightly. The trembling was not synchronized at first, but as the trembling increased, it gradually became the same. Rumble! The sky seemed to shake and the earth shook. At the place where the light spots landed, a huge yellow mirror appeared. The other side of the mirror was exactly the same as what Xiaohua had seen before. However, Xiaohua sensed that there were fluctuations of world energy all around the mirror. Only the surface of the mirror was very calm. Needless to say, this mirror should be the passageway to enter the cave. Sure enough, Xiangyang waved his hand and said, "Let's go!" After saying that, he flew into the mirror and disappeared. When Xiaohua followed him in, Xiangyang had already set on the mountain ridge not far away. According to the instructions on the token, Xiaohua and Xiangyang were able to easily find the disciple who was guarding the medicine garden in a rather large Immortal's cave after his meditation. Ha! Seeing a place about the same size as Master's Immortal's cave, Xiaohua almost jumped up in joy. Xiangyang looked at this little junior brother who was beaming with joy. His previous worry had already disappeared. Although Xiangyang wasn't very familiar with the Immortal's cave in the Eastern Ridge, he still took Xiaohua to see it. This Immortal's cave was divided into 3 sections. The outermost section was a living room with jade tables, chairs, and other things. In the middle was a cloud bed for resting. Next to the cloud bed were bookshelves and other things. The innermost section was the largest and was divided into different caves. There was even a mountain spring that led into these caves. Looking at Xiaohua's somewhat puzzled expression, Xiangyang smiled and said, "Generally, the Immortal's cave of a cultivator is divided into these 3 sections. Little junior brother should know about the outermost and middle sections. As for the innermost section, most of them are used to cultivate extremely precious spiritual herbs. For example, in Master's Immortal's cave, there are spiritual herbs that are rare even in the Imperial Thunder sect." Then, he pointed at the spring in the cave and said, "This cave is probably used to cultivate different spiritual herbs. Moreover, this Immortal's cave should have existed before the Eastern Ridge was turned into a medicinal garden." Eldest senior brother is right. Xiaohua smiled and said, There are spiritual herbs all over the mountain. Who would plant spiritual herbs in their own immortal's cave? Hee, I'm just guessing. Xian Yang shook his head and said, actually, each spiritual herb requires a different amount of spiritual qi. Although the Eastern Ridge is rich in spiritual qi and it's more than enough to cultivate ordinary spiritual herbs, it's still not enough to cultivate precious spiritual herbs. Didn't you see these different caves? Every cave should have a different array used to promote the growth of different spiritual herbs. Promote the growth of spiritual herbs. Xiaohua's heart stirred. It was very easy for him to think of the space's backtrack. Okay, little junior brother, I still have other things to do. I won't take you around the Eastern Ridge. Xian Yang stretched and said, after all, this Eastern Ridge. I've only been here a few times. Wait until you're familiar with it, then you'll know. Thank you for your guidance, eldest senior brother. Xiaohua bowed and thanked him. You and I are brothers, there's no need to be so polite. Xian Yang helped Xiaohua up and said, actually, when you asked why there's no one guarding the Eastern Ridge, there are still 2 reasons that I didn't tell you. Senior brother, there's no harm in saying it. When Xiaohua heard that there were actually 2 reasons, he couldn't help but be surprised. The first reason is that the spiritual qi here is very violent. It's not easy to draw it into the meridians, and it's very unfavorable for a qi condensation stage disciple's cultivation. Xian Yang looked at Xiaohua's not too good expression and said, however, I heard from Master that little junior brother has the hidden fire physique. The fire attribute is the most violent. Maybe it won't affect you much? You can try first. If it really doesn't work, then you'll have to do this job for a year. At this time next year, when you're promoted from an apprentice disciple to an official disciple, it won't be too late to find another job. And okay. Xiaohua nodded. Now that I think about it, I really should have discussed it with eldest senior brother first. I was really rash at that time. Hee, you're still young. Once bitten, twice shy. This little loss is nothing, Xian Yang said. Then, he adjusted his expression and said in a low voice, there's still the second reason? It's a place 100 li north of the Eastern Ridge. It's the strangest forbidden area of the Imperial Thunder sect. Previously it was said that several disciples on duty inexplicably disappeared. No one knew if they were alive or dead. Some people suspect that it has something to do with that forbidden area. Ah? Xiaohua was frightened by Xian Yang's words and broke out in a cold sweat. He couldn't help but shrink his neck. Therefore, little junior brother, if you have nothing to do, don't go out blindly. Inside the Eastern Ridge's formation, there will be disciples from the Qiqiao Pavilion coming to pick flame dawn grass every year. Now that you're on duty, if they come, open the formation and give them a sufficient amount of flame dawn grass. If they don't come, then send the flame dawn grass back to Thundershock Palace. Left and right. Don't go near that forbidden area, Xian Yang said seriously. Oh, so that's how it is. After listening to Xian Yang's warning, Xiaohua's heart relaxed. Xian Yang's words had always been filled with warnings, but Xiaohua understood that this last reason was most likely made up by Xian Yang himself. He was afraid that Xiaohua would be immature and run around. This Eastern Ridge was more than 100 li away from the forbidden area. It was also protected by an extremely powerful formation. How could those disciples disappear for no reason? I'm afraid it's the same story as Jinxie and Qin Mingwei last night, right? Xiaohua sneered in his heart. However, he was also grateful. He cupped his hands and said, many thanks for eldest senior brother's reminder. Little junior brother's cultivation is more important. I definitely won't cause trouble. Good, then this elder brother is relieved. Xian Yang clapped his hands and said, you have this elder brother's message talisman in your hand. That message talisman can send messages over a long distance in my Imperial Thunder sect. If you have any problems with your cultivation method or other matters, you can send a message to this elder brother. This elder brother will rush over as soon as possible. Good. Then, this elder brother will take his leave. Xian Yang flew into the air. Xiaohua opened the formation and sent him out. Xian Yang was still in the air, but he was still somewhat worried. That little junior brother you have to cultivate diligently. Last night, Master personally made a trip to the Thunderquake Palace for you. He has high expectations for you. You must not let down Master's painstaking efforts. Little junior brother understands, Xiaohua said with a smile. Eldest senior brother, go back and tell Master that little junior brother will be able to ask him for guidance in less than 2 years. This elder brother understands. This elder brother will definitely pass this message to Master. Xiang Yang laughed. With a wave of his big sleeve, he flew into the distance. Looking at Xiang Yang's back and the smile in Xiang Yang's eyes just now, Xiaohua knew that Xiang Yang didn't believe his words at all. Cultivating from Qi refining level 10 to foundation establishment in 2 years? Perhaps even Li Zongbao, who was known as a cultivation genius, couldn't accomplish this, right? But what was the truth? Xiaohua shrugged his shoulders and used his finger to point. A ray of brilliance shot from the command medallion onto the mirror that had just been opened. Seeing the mirror rapidly shrink, Xiaohua muttered to himself. If I'm happy, I'll give you guys a pleasant surprise next year. But wouldn't doing this be too high profile? It's very inconsistent with my low-key style of conduct. Xiaohua pinched his chin, somewhat distressed. -7. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.